Chapter 41. Bourne decided to show off his skills. Of course, he is not prepared to show anything beyond what some people expect. After all, strategic deception cannot be relaxed at all times. He just wanted to show some family heritage. When it comes to their knowledge of various magical animals, potion masters and top magical zoologists are actually on par with each other. It's just that magi zoologists have more knowledge in the three aspects of treatment, rescue, and breeding, while potion masters are often only good at the efficient use of magical animals. I can't stop crying. Bourne waved his wand and recited a spell. If you have previewed Black Magic, Self-Defense Guide, you will know that this is actually. However, Horace once taught Bourne that this curse can also be used to deal with potion materials such as swamp diggers. For potion makers, the most valuable part of a swamp digger's body is its muscles, but it does take a bit of skill to completely peel them off. If you cannot master the separation of flesh and bones spell, which has already entered the field of black magic, then the snot curse, which is much easier than it, is an excellent substitute. Following the guidance of the wand, the spell worked on each of the swamp diggers that either jumped into the air or prepared to pounce on him. These little killers suddenly lost their vitality, and snot and tears continued to flow from their bodies. However, because they are dark magical creatures created by a failed magic experiment, swamp diggers do not have noses and eyes at all. Living in swamps, they usually only rely on touch to hunt and survive. When the snot curse takes effect, the bones, blood and organs in swamp digger's body begin to melt rapidly involuntarily, and rapidly seep out from the surface of the skin. Their muscles become dry and hard, like a real piece of wood. The mucus squeezed out by the curse will quickly solidify on the surface of the swamp digger's body, eventually forming a translucent hard shell similar to amber. At this stage, ordinary potion makers only need to peel off this hard shell to obtain their dry and hard muscles. However, as a descendant of a potions master, Bourne knew a few other tricks to replace manual labor. Open the Ilaho hole. Bourne once again cast the spell that a first-year wizard had just learned on the swamp digs that he had roughly processed. You know, the mouth is also a hole. One by one, they turned into old bacon swamp diggers. Under the influence of the curse, their triangular mouths were suddenly forced to open to the limit. Immediately afterwards, their bodies split open, and the skin and the hard shell made of mucus all fell off. Those swamp diggers were only treated with magic twice, and they all turned into swamp diggers bacon jerky. Even though he said so much, in fact, the two spells that Bourne recited were so fast that they were almost connected together. So much so that he even had time to reach out and catch a piece of dried bacon from swamp digs from mid-air, and also brought it to his mouth and took a small bite of the bacon with his teeth. Not bad. After appreciating the quality of the meat, Bourne gave a fair evaluation based on the Heratizian method of identifying potion materials. The little wizards were stunned. And Professor Quirrell couldn't help but swallowed when he saw Bourne eating dried bacon from the swamp. Gryffindor, 2 points from Gryffindor. For damaging and eating teaching aids. But he immediately added, given that Mr. Slughorn successfully used the snot curse and showed us how to deal with dark magical creatures like the swamp digger, he also served as a landfinder, earned 5 house points. The little wizards of Gryffindor instantly burst into fierce applause and cheers. This atmosphere even inspired the little badgers, who usually have a good relationship with the little lions. The little wizards of Hufflepuff were also excited about Bourne's wonderful performance. Only Hermione was a little depressed. Obviously I also added 3 points to the college, but these people, hey. Miss Beaver thought angrily, but she also applauded Bourne. Because, she had to admit that Bourne looked really stylish when he just cast the spell. Next, Professor Quirrell, who had no teaching aids, could only start giving a dry lecture to the young wizards. To be fair, even if he was not possessed by Voldemort and guided by him, Quirrell's magic skills were actually among the good ones. At the very least, if you give defense against the dark arts classes to young wizards, you will definitely become a qualified teacher. Although he didn't know the usage of Ilajo Cave behind Bourne, the fact that he could use the swamp dig as a teaching tool proved that he was a knowledgeable wizard. You know, in the past few years, the defense against the dark arts teachers at Hogwarts would often only explain the simple snot curse in the book in the first class to the first-year students. Those people had no idea that the snot curse could be used against swamp diggers. However, he had to pretend to stutter, and there were no teaching aids for demonstration, so this lesson that should have gained a lot for the little wizards, instead made many little wizards confused. To give an example, it's like not using ginseng as a medicine to treat illnesses and save lives, but instead pickle it into kimchi and eat it. It's a pity. The bell rang for the end of get out of class, and the drowsy little wizards suddenly woke up. For the first time, they felt a hint of gratitude to Filch, who had already shown his stingy and mean temper even though they had only been in contact for a short time. Thanks for ringing the bell on time. Keep the little wizard from the Slughorn family. I have something to ask him. In Quirrell's mind, Voldemort said something. The leader's words will cause his subordinates to run away and break their legs. Originally, during the break between classes, Quirrell wanted to drink some milk tea to moisten his throat or something. But Voldemort's words made him immediately stand up from the seat behind the podium and quickly walk towards the door of the classroom. I hope those little wizards don't go too fast. However, just as Quirrell stepped out of the classroom door with his left foot, a strong hand that had been single for more than 30 years suddenly stretched out from the blind spot outside the door and grasped Quirrell's neck. Don't resist. Voldemort stopped Quirrell, who was about to use his wand to fight back, and then remained silent. The Dark Lord did not want to show his weak side to others, even if this person was once one of his more trusted subordinates. Quirrell had a sad expression on his face. This is definitely not entirely an act. Under Voldemort's warning, he could only let the owner of the powerful hand push him and step backward into the defense against the dark arts classroom. The man waved the wand in his hand, and with a bang, the classroom door was closed. At the same time, Quirrell's back was pushed until it touched the wall. Underneath the greasy hair, the man had an intimidating face. He held Quirrell's neck with one hand, and the wand in the other hand was pressed against Quirrell's temple. Hi! Professor Snape, you want to? Chapter 42. Potions class is the class that the little lions are least looking forward to, because Snape is a professor who is good at deducting points from Gryffindor in tricks. George and Fred told me that they once got a point deducted for stepping into the classroom door with their right foot. Sitting in the potions classroom, seeing that Snape hadn't arrived yet, Ron started chatting with Harry as he should. And it's 1 point per person. This made Harry very worried. At the sorting dinner a few days ago, he and Professor Snape looked at each other, and the scar on his head hurt for half the night. He felt that he and the professor were not compatible. Don't listen to his nonsense, Hermione interrupted Ron and rolled her eyes at him. How can the professor deduct points so casually? This must be a prank by George and Fred. Most of the points they deducted were because they were late for class. Who knows, anyway, it is difficult for Gryffindor to get extra points in potions class. This is a recognized fact. Ron curled his lips. Maybe Bourne is an exception. My other brother Percy told me that Bourne's grandfather is the former head of Slytherin, and like Professor Snape, he is also a potions master. Bourne, do you want to join our group? At this time, before Professor Snape arrived, Bourne was looking at the furnishings in the potions classroom. The reason why he used the word viewing was because he felt that this classroom was really well decorated. This classroom is a huge basement in Hogwarts Castle. The temperature is much lower than that of the main building, and it seems that due to some simple meteorological magic, the air is not as humid as ordinary basements. Cool and dry, this is the ideal environment for storing most potion ingredients. As for some materials that need to be preserved in special ways, there are many shelves around the classroom, with many glass bottles placed in different categories. The potion materials are packed in and soaked in specific magic potions. For example, some warts that are regularly removed from the backs of mottler rats like deer antlers are soaked in a translucent light green active agent. A glass bottle contains exactly one plant, and they are arranged in a row on the shelf. Each glass bottle is also labeled with the collection time. And the warts of the mottler rat were still squirming inside the bottle, like sea anemones. Compared to the shabby defense against the dark arts classroom. That classroom, after a thief sneaks in, he might have to put down some galleons before leaving. In the eyes of knowledgeable people like Bourne, this place is not suitable for children. The wizard has taken classes and is qualified to serve as a laboratory for some potion masters. Of course, that's just potions master, not potions master. Bourne guessed that Snape, like Grandpa Horace, probably had his own private laboratory. The value of the potion materials stored inside may also be inconvenient to be disclosed to the outside world. Just as Bourne was thinking about it, Ron's question brought him back to reality. Me? No, Neville and I are in the same group, Bourne said. 2 pages of his textbook were torn off by the swamp digger, so we two have to share the same book. The swamp digger riot in the last class made the dormitory, which was not rich in potions textbooks, even worse. In the end, Hermione agreed to help, and all 5 of them had books available. Bourne and Neville, Hermione and Ron, Harry and Seamus, 6 people share 3 books. Bang! The door to the potions classroom was pushed open from the outside. The sound was like a signal, and the little wizards who were having fun just now stopped immediately. Snape walked in from the outside without even looking at the students in the audience, let alone counting the number of people. He walked straight to the blackboard and tapped it with his wand, and all the blackboard writing required for this lesson suddenly appeared. "Class," he said. A simple sentence can make the atmosphere in the classroom become solemn. In this regard, he is holding a bowl of water very evenly, whether it is the little lion of Gryffindor or the little snake of Slytherin, for this Professor Snape's fear was equal. "First of all, put all the books away." Snape spoke very quickly, and Bourne noticed that he seemed to have a Yorkshire accent, with the vowel a basically replaced by a short sound. "In this class, all you have to do is listen to me. The content in the textbook is what you should have read before class. In addition, potions class does not require you to wave your wand silly, but if some people think that making potions is not a kind of magic, they are wrong. The cauldron that is simmered slowly until green smoke is emitted, the boiling liquid that emits a refreshing fragrance, and the mysterious power that is quickly released after entering the human bloodstream, these things are actually magic. I don't expect any of you to understand this. On the contrary, for those who understand, I can teach them how to increase their reputation, brew glory, and even prevent death. Of course, the premise is still that you are not the kind of fools I often encounter." After he finished his short opening remarks, Ron found that Hermione, who was sitting at the same table as him, had almost moved to the edge of her seat, leaning forward, as if eager to prove that she was not a fool. Across the aisle, Ron raised his eyebrows at Harry, and the 2 best friends exchanged glances with their lips pursed. Whoosh! Bang! Snape was not seen waving his wand or chanting a spell. Suddenly, like a precision-guided missile, a piece of chalk took off from the podium and instantly hit Ron's red-haired head. However, throwing the chalk tip was just a small punishment, and the real big commandment was yet to come. "Potter!" Snape suddenly shouted loudly, "What will we get if we add narcissus root powder to wormwood infusion?" Potter looked around. Seamus, who was sitting at the same table with him, looked confused, and Ron, who was across the aisle, clearly had "Sorry, brother" written on his face. Hermione raised her hands high. "I don't know, Professor," said Harry. Snape curled his lips contemptuously. "Tisk, tisk, Mr. Potter, the famous savior, also has things he doesn't know about. It seems that fame doesn't mean everything." Many people on the Slytherin side laughed, but Draco, Goyle and Crabbe laughed the most. "Then let's change the question, Mr. Potter. If I wanted you to find me a bezoar, where would you look for it?" Hermione raised her arms high without leaving her seat, and Harry had no idea what a bezoar was. He was so ashamed that he was picking his toes, as if he wanted to dig out a 3-bedroom apartment in his shoes. "I don't know, Professor. I assume you haven't read a single book before school started, right, Potter?" Snape seemed to be staring at him and had no intention of letting him go. "I flipped through thousands of miraculous herbs and mushrooms. Have you read it? Well, tell me, what is the difference between Aconitum scapularis and Aconitum wolfsbane?" At this time, Hermione finally stood up, her arms raised high as if they were reaching the ceiling of the classroom. "Sit down!" Snape shouted angrily. "Gryffindor will deduct 1 point for contradicting the teacher in class. In addition, Porter asked me to tell you that the answers to the 3 questions are." Chapter 43. What a great kid, what a shame. Snape sighed inwardly. If Bourne had not been placed in Gryffindor, but was instead a student of Slytherin, with the meticulous logic, knowledge reserve and clear understanding of the cutting-edge figures in the field of potions that he had just shown, he had to add 20 points to Bourne. Moreover, Bourne's additions of "you can get fecal stones from the potions classroom and find him immediately if you are poisoned" are really in line with Snape's wishes. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but glance at Harry. He was obviously a scumbag, but he still wore glasses, his body proportions were not very good, he looked like a chicken, he didn't look good in any way, but he only has a pair of eyes that are exactly the same as his mother's. "Child, please be more careful." The passage about bezoar was specially told by Snape to Harry. The knowledge that it can be used to quickly absorb poisons will not actually appear in lower-grade textbooks at all. It was because he was worried that Harry might be targeted by someone and be poisoned that Snape taught the young wizards the trick of using fecal stones as an emergency. The supplement that Bourne made did patch up his somewhat ill-advised explanation. Gryffindor, 3 extra points. In the end, he decided to give Bourne some points, even if it was mutually beneficial. The little lions suddenly became excited. If it were not a potions class but another class, they would probably stand up and cheer. You know, let alone first-year freshmen, even the outstanding seniors of Gryffindor's senior class can't get many extra points in potions class. And Bourne, a first-year freshman, got extra points in his first potions class. It was a rare 3 points at once. This was simply a manifestation of Merlin. Of course, Bourne didn't know what the little lions thought like this, and even if he knew, he would probably laugh it off. What's the matter with Merlin? Moreover, Snape would not agree with the ideas of the little lions, because Slytherins have a saying since ancient times, Merlin is a graduate of Slytherin. How could he bless Gryffindor? The extra point period was over, and the potions class quickly returned to what it should be. Whether it is the little lion of Gryffindor or the little snake of Slytherin, they have neither time nor the courage to talk too much in the classroom practice sessions. Magic potions are generally divided into 4 categories: antidotes, poisons, witchcraft medicines and alchemical medicines, with the difficulty of making them increasing in order. The liquefied patronus charm that Dumbledore asked Horace to help make before was a kind of witchcraft medicine. The first lesson for the little wizards is to learn a simple potion used to treat boils. The ingredient list for this potion only contains 4 ingredients: dried nettles, snake teeth, horned slugs, and porcupine quills. However, if you are not careful during the production process, it is still easy to cause some accidents. For example, Neville made a huge mistake in the last step and put the porcupine quills directly into the cauldron while it was still boiling over the fire. Fortunately, Bourne, who was working with him, had quick hands and eyes, and put out the fire at the last moment, so the crucible did not explode. After the porcupine quills were completely melted, Bourne lit the blowtorch with his wand and carefully adjusted the flame, then reheated the potion by simmering it over low heat. While the little wizard was brewing the potion, Snape kept walking up and down the aisles, wondering. The potions professor loves to criticize operations and is particularly venomous towards Gryffindor students. Harry was almost driven crazy. Because Snape always stared at him. He obviously followed the standard steps in the book, but after reading it, the professor still shook his head and sighed, with "Why are you so stupid" written all over his face. Of course, as mentioned before, little lions are not the only ones who suffer in potions class. Even though he was slightly less venomous towards the little snakes because he was the head of Slytherin, when he deserved criticism, Snape's output was still very fierce. For example, Malfoy's little follower Ben Goyle didn't know if he was lazy, but he put his wand on the edge of the cauldron while stirring the potion. As a result, the wand slipped directly into the boiling potion. His crucible took off in the next second and came into direct contact with the ceiling of the basement. Thanks to Snape's timely intervention, a pot of boiling potion was prevented from spilling on the entire class. Then the professor gave Goyle a love caress on the head and punished him for today. A man cleans the men's room in the Slytherin common room. Seeing Snape getting angry at Goyle, many little lions were holding back their laughter, trying hard not to laugh out loud. However, Bourne noticed that Snape had reflexively blocked Harry in the moment the accident happened. Exemplary of verbal integrity and physical integrity. The bell rang for the end of get out of class. The little wizards were all exhausted after attending 2 big classes that were extremely physically and mentally draining. Hungry, they rushed directly to the banquet hall of Hogwarts after class. What surprised them was that the lunch provided by the school today seemed to be particularly rich compared to the lunches in the past that were more or less white people's meals. Fried chicken legs, fried pork chops, French fries, roasted whole chicken, roasted quail, roasted pork chops, roasted potatoes. In short, it's all hard food. Naturally, there were more little wizards sitting down to eat in the banquet hall today than before, from all grades, and the excitement was as lively as a dinner party. Wherever there is excitement, there are twins. Hey, Bourne, I heard you got extra points in both classes this morning. Great job. George and Fred came over. They sat down next to Bourne and Neville with their plates, and Ron and Harry sat across the table. Why is today's lunch so rich? There was a plate with an S shape in front of Bourne. Horace told him that he paid extra money for the school and prepared nutritious meals for him. What he ate today was dragon ribs. Ron had just exchanged a large chicken drumstick for a small piece with him to try, but he found that he couldn't chew the large fiber inside. Only Bourne ate it with gusto, as he had been accustomed to it since childhood. Even got some grilled quail and salad to eat. Today is Thursday, Fred explained while holding a piece of pie. Not only Bourne, but all the other little wizards were curious about this, thinking it was another secret of Hogwarts. It's not a secret. George waved his hand to signal the first-year wizard not to make a fuss. Every Thursday in each grade, either in the morning or in the afternoon, there will definitely be 2 big classes in a row. This is because professors will basically arrange the classes with the most homework before Thursday, leaving Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the little wizard to write homework. There are only 2 days on the weekend, so I may not be able to finish my homework. 2 big classes in a row, well, you guys feel it too, you are tired and hungry, so the lunch and dinner prepared by the school on Thursday are quite sumptuous. Chapter 44. Crunch. He opened the door and quickly looked around before Quirrell tiptoed out of the office. Noon had arrived and he was about to take action. Master, the biting cabbage in Professor Sprout's greenhouse is ripe. I'm going to steal some. Before he could finish reporting his plan to Voldemort, there was a sound of flapping wings coming from the corner of the corridor. Quirrell looked curiously towards the direction of the sound, and saw that it was a grey-white owl flying into the school corridor with a small package. The management of Hogwarts is really bad. Even though there is a special owl shed, they still fly into the school to deliver letters and poop and urinate everywhere. However, just when he was about to use the confusion spell that he had become more and more proficient in recently to drive away the owl and trick the recipient of the letter, the big bird suddenly stopped in the air and threw the package he was holding on his feet. Quirrell then turned around and flew away. Hey! Quirrell just caught the package and squeezed it with his hands, and found that the contents inside felt quite familiar. When he opened it, he saw, as expected, that inside the package was a small bag containing galleons. But before Quirrell could figure out which kind person was rewarding him, a small red envelope attached to the bottom of the bag suddenly sprouted 2 wings and fluttered in front of him. Roar, roar, roaring letter. He quickly raised his wand, but it was still a step too late, and roaring letter roared first. I've caught you! Shouted Xin, making Quirrell tremble in fright. What did you do? Didn't you just eat a piece of dried meat from a swamp digger? As for that, did you deduct points from my little burn? Do you know that children's hearts are sensitive and fragile and cannot withstand too many blows? Today's market price for swamp diggers is 8 zecos each. There are 10 gold galleons in the bag, which is enough to buy a new litter of teaching aids. You can keep the rest of the money for yourself. Remember, your former potions Professor Horace Slughorn, will have Dumbledore watching you in the future. Don't deduct points from my little Bourne. After delivering the message, the roaring letter stretched out a long red tongue and spat it at Quirrell before spontaneously igniting in mid-air and burning into a ball of ashes. As soon as the shock subsided, Quirrell quickly looked around the corridor, and after confirming that there was no one else, he began to curse, "Scared me. Damn old man! Who are you, you dare to order me?" After cursing for a while, he angrily put away the gold coins, because Voldemort needed a lot of supplements after he was possessed, and he was really tight on money recently, so he couldn't care whether this bag of money was considered snatched food, and then, continue towards a secret passage that Voldemort told him leads to Professor Sprout's greenhouse. Throughout the whole process, Voldemort possessed him as if he was pretending to be dead and remained speechless. Unlike the relatively simple-minded Quirrell, Horace's roaring letter undoubtedly made him think more. For example, how did Horace know what happened in class a few hours ago? Was he in contact with Dumbledore, and why did Dumbledore communicate so closely with a potions master? For another example, isn't his current half-dead look a bit too dangerous? After all, Horace might have known that he had made a Horcrux. The method of making a Horcrux was something that the former dean had inadvertently tricked him into asking. Idiot, you have to mess with someone. You have to mess with him. There were many variables in the plan, which made Voldemort feel very angry. Although Quirrell actually tested Bourne in the defense against the dark arts class under his guidance, he certainly would not blame himself. Voldemort naturally placed the blame on Quirrell's head. I have to speed up the progress, he thought to himself, at least, I must use him to get the magic stone before I suck all the life out of this guy. 8th floor, Principal's office. Dumbledore. What on earth are you thinking about? Snape slapped his hands on the principal's desk, supporting the desk, and asked the old man with white hair and beard in front of him. The old man who was being questioned was eating his lunch with a spoon, a bowl of raspberry ice cream carefully made by the house elves. He ate slowly, because while eating, he was flipping through a newspaper. However, this newspaper is not the Daily Prophet that British wizards often read, but the Howl of the Gargoyle from France. The front page headline of this newspaper was an exclusive interview with Nick Flamel by a French reporter. The newspaper published Nick Flamel's original words during the interview: "I have handed over the Philosopher's Stone to an extremely reliable and powerful person, safeguarded by a powerful wizard." Although the master alchemist did not name the wizard, the reporter who interviewed him made some well-founded predictions. However, based on his understanding of the word reliable, he first excluded British wizards. "Be patient, Severus," Dumbledore said with a smile on his face, raised his eyelids slightly, and looked over his glasses at the head of Slytherin who looked like he was about to pull out fireworks. "Would you like to try the house elf's new dessert? It tastes great." As he spoke, the old man pushed the ice cream bowl on the table forward. "Just for a moment," meaning just for a moment. However, the expression on Snape's face was still very serious. "No matter what you think, but you must give me a reason now. Why should you keep Quirrell in Hogwarts? You have obviously discovered him." "The problem?" "He does have a problem," Dumbledore admitted with a nod. Speaking of this issue, he also sat up straight. "Did you know something?" Snape continued to ask, as if he was breaking the crucible to ask the truth. "Is he a subordinate of the mysterious man? Also, was he the intruder in the invasion of Gringotts not long ago?" "On the latter point, I'm actually not sure yet. After all, the intruder's methods were indeed very clever. Even if he didn't achieve his goal and grab the magic stone, he still didn't leave any evidence. Moreover, even if there is any slight evidence that survives, the goblins in Gringotts are currently busy improving their anti-thief waterfalls and have no intention of communicating with us. So, even though it's been weeks since that incident, we still have very limited information." When the word goblin was mentioned, Dumbledore, an old man who was known to have a good temper, also rarely had a bad tone in his voice. "As for your previous question, I can only admit that Kylo did make some bad friends in Albania. The group confusion spell he used on the students, and some of the spell skills displayed in it, do have the shadow of the person you and I both know." Chapter 45. "I knew that was the case." Bourne smiled and took out his wand. The gift from Grandpa Horace came with a card containing a description of the Whomping Willow Bat. The first time he saw this card, Bourne noticed something. However, at that time, because he was surrounded by Gryffindor little lions, he could not tell what he had discovered. After lunch, he went to the library and found a deserted corner to sit down, and then he began to try to decipher the secrets on the cards. There was a passage written on the card, and while it wasn't obvious, a few letters did have a different font than the others. "Test, test." After thinking about it, I felt that since this was Horace's test, it was probably related to the knowledge he had learned this week. If it's a piece of paper. He suddenly thought of the piece of parchment that Professor McGonagall had given him after the Transfiguration class, and his intuition told him that he might have guessed it right. So, Bourne whispered a spell and cast a transformation spell on the card. He didn't deliberately guide the transformation spell. He just repeated the technique of turning matches into needles that Professor McGonagall taught them in class, but that was enough. When the transformation spell took effect, the card immediately floated more than an inch high from the library table, then began to fold itself, eventually transforming into the shape of a small paper crucible. By folding and splicing, the letters on the cards are also scrambled. On the rim of the crucible, a sentence consisting of a string of words appeared: "Another gift, also hidden in the box." Because he had his first flying lesson in the afternoon, Bourne did not put the Whomping Willow Bat back in his dormitory. It and the box containing it were beside Bourne at this time. "What are you waiting for?" Opening the box, Bourne reached out and touched the raffia underneath the triple speed, and as expected, pulled something out from inside. A folding wallet. It's not big, and its surface is dyed a color similar to dry raffia, so it's very inconspicuous when hidden inside. However, Bourne, who had received a lot of general education in magic from Grandpa Horace, still recognized the specialness of this wallet. Although its surface color is dyed brownish yellow, if you look carefully enough, you can still see that there are silver stripes on the leather that look like banknote security lines. At the same time, there is no trace of cutting on this wallet. Very strangely, it is made of a single piece of leather folded into the shape of the wallet, Moreover, since those creases are not dyed, the original color of the leather, which is dark green, can be seen. There are various indications that this wallet is made of deformed lizard skin and is a precious alchemy tool. Shape-shifting lizards are magical animals that can be found across the UK and Ireland, often growing up to 10 inches long. Newt's commander wrote in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them that shape-shifting lizards have never been discovered by muggles. Even if the population size is not small, even wizards can rarely catch them alive. The shape-shifting lizards are very good at hiding because they have the ability to shrink their bodies at will. Their skin is a valuable material that can be used to make wallets or money bags. The wallet made of deformed lizard skin shrinks when a stranger approaches, making it difficult to detect. Once the owner puts the item in the bag, only he can take it out. Furthermore, due to the magical properties of magical animals like shape-shifting lizards, their skin is very suitable for fixing the seamless stretch spell. If the integrity of the material used in the wallet is high enough, it can even ignore the breaking spell of the seamless stretch spell to a certain extent. Bourne picked up the wallet, and a stripe on it gradually emitted a silvery light, but soon dimmed again. Just like fingerprint authentication, the magical contract of the alchemical item authentication holder is announced. It would be hypocritical to say that I am not surprised when I receive such a magical gift. Therefore, after reaching the contract, Bourne happily opened his wallet and reached in. Really? There was something else hidden inside, and the wallet was indeed under a traceless stretching charm. He took out a piece of paper and a glass reagent bottle the size of a thermos cup, which was filled with a liquid that exuded a little silver light. The frosted stopper was sealed with wax. Dear little Bourne, seeing the words is like seeing the face. Bourne read the letter written by Grandpa Horace to him. I knew that my little Bourne would definitely be able to discover and solve the puzzle on that card. This deformed lizard wallet is your reward. Remember to carry it with you. There is a lot of space inside. You can put it and put your little toys in there too. In addition, that potion is a liquefied patroness charm potion, which has a certain restraint effect on all kinds of black magic. Dark wizards are also afraid of this potion. Although Hogwarts Castle is very safe, accidents can sometimes happen if you are not prepared. If you encounter trouble, remember to go to your Grandpa Albus as soon as possible. If you can't find him, go to your Dean. Dumbledore's phoenix companion is called Fox. I'll send you some salamander jerky later. It likes this kind of food the most. You need to find opportunities to build a good relationship with it. In an emergency, shout Fox loudly, and it will be able to hear it as long as it is in the castle. If the situation is particularly urgent and you or your friends have no time to ask for help, then use the liquefied patroness charm potion, which can be taken externally or internally. When you encounter a bad guy, you can just throw a whole bottle of potion at him without worrying about wasting it. We, the Slughorn family, dare not say anything else, but we have never been short of potions. Finally, remember to commit and don't forget to write home every week. Love, Horace Slughorn. After reading this letter, Bourne could guess why Grandpa Horace knew so much about his situation at Hogwarts. It was 100% that Principal Dumbledore acted as an informant. Moreover, Horace most likely also learned from Dumbledore that Hogwarts Castle might not be peaceful this year. Otherwise, Horace would not have hurriedly sent Bourne a bottle of liquefied patroness charm potion before the first week of school was over. However, even so, Horace still did not explain everything to Bourne. Because in the eyes of the old wizard, Bourne is just an 11-year-old child and should not worry about the dark side. That's not a bad thing. After putting his things away and carrying his lizard wallet with him, Bourne was ready to leave the castle for his afternoon flying lesson. However, before leaving the library, he had to return a few books he had borrowed over the past 2 days. The Hogwarts librarian is a thin witch who looks about 50 years old. Many young wizards at Hogwarts secretly call her the Vulture because she has a pair of vulture-like eyes. Her eyes can instantly lock onto her prey, those dishonest little wizards in the library. Usually their actions are damaging the books. Mrs. Pants, I'm here to return the books I borrowed. Analysis of the Principles of Household Charms, Basics of Alchemy and Principles of Muggle Machinery, 1921, 12 Miraculous Uses of the Restoration Charm, and that is Napoleon a Wizard by Magic Press. Chapter 46. Bourne, what are you doing? Harry and Ron greeted Bourne, who showed up belatedly, on a grassy field next to the castle. This was the venue where they were about to take flying lessons. There are already many young wizards gathered here. Just like the potions class, Gryffindor will take this class with Slytherin. The Lion Court and the Snake Court came together and inevitably began to compete. Due to local conditions, the topics of their comparison naturally revolved around broomsticks and Quidditch. Bourne, have you brought the triple speed? Take it out and open the eyes of those Slytherins. Ron said a little excitedly. The little excitement here means that he basically made everyone present hear his voice clearly at once. And his purpose is also very pure, that is, just to let some people hear it. Because before Bourne came, a young wizard from a pure-blood noble family. Well, yes, it was Malfoy. Had been talking a lot about things related to flying. Moreover, the story Draco told rarely did not have the element of my dad, but ended with I passed by a Muggle helicopter in a thrilling way, just a tiny bit away from becoming a Gryffindor. Headless Nick ends. Not to be outdone, Ron told the story of how when he was a child, he stole a broken broom that was replaced by his second brother Charlie, the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and almost hit a Muggle hang glider. With the two of them at the beginning, some young wizards born in wizard families also joined in and shared their stories vividly. Seamus Finnegan said that his mother was excited to give birth to his big boy while watching a group match of the Quidditch World Cup because the German team she was supporting was knocked out. Then she packed him up and rode returning home on a broomstick. I have been inseparable from broomsticks and Quidditch since I was born, he proudly announced to everyone. Coincidentally, Zabinai from Slytherin also told a similar story. According to him, his biological father and his mother, Mrs. Zabinai, also met while watching the same Quidditch match. Her mother's husband at the time was still participating in the game, but during that game, the man was unfortunately knocked off his broomstick by a bludger and broke his neck. Although this group of people obviously misunderstood the difference between story and accident, seeing the way they swore so confidently, many young wizards from Muggle families began to believe it. Some are happy, some are worried. Those who are happy are because they will soon learn how to ride a broomstick, so they find it very interesting. Some young wizards who are worried, such as Hermione, are mostly worried about whether they can learn to fly, and whether their grades in this course will be far behind those of their classmates who were born in wizarding families. She borrowed a copy of The Origins of Quidditch from the library for this purpose, and she still took it with her when she came to take flying lessons. She kept talking about some Quidditch terms she learned from this book, as if only in this way can she feel at ease. Of course, there are some exceptions. Although he was born into a pure-blood wizard family, Neville, an honest child, said more honestly, I have never ridden a broomstick in my life. My grandma never let me get close to them. Therefore, when Hermione was reciting those Quidditch terms, he was the only one who listened carefully and seemed to want to learn something in this way. However, the white smoke inside the glass ball he held in his hand, a memory ball sent to him by his grandmother yesterday, which can remind the holder if he has forgotten something, gradually turned red. But after thinking about it for a long time, he still didn't think about what he forgot to bring in this class. Bourne, while there is no class, hurry up. Just when Ron was about to say something, Harry quickly pulled his arm. Their flying teacher, Mrs. Huochi, is here. The teacher had grey hair like the spikes of a hedgehog and yellow eyes like a falcon. Around her neck hung a whistle hung by a belt, and a pair of aviator goggles. She also used her wand to cast a levitating spell, pulling more than 20 broomsticks behind her. Mrs. Huochi is a consistent person, with a very straightforward personality. She walked up to the little wizards and waved her magic wand without saying anything, causing the broomsticks to land accurately at the feet of each little wizard. Now, what are you waiting for? Mrs. Huochi said loudly, stretch out your dominant hand, put the palm of your hand on the broom handle, and then say the first command to it, get up. Get up. The little wizard present immediately obeyed. Harry's broom immediately responded to him and accurately jumped into his hand. Ron next to him also received a response, but the broom bounced up too fast and he failed to catch it, and the broom handle made a bang sound. Hit him in the head. Ouch! Ron let out a cry of pain. The little Slytherin wizard standing opposite them all chuckled. Draco, on the other hand, was holding the broom steadily and looking at the Harrow duo with a proud look on his face. Hermione's broom wasn't very obedient. She shouted get up several times in a cadence, but the broom just kept rolling on the lawn as if it had turned into a lazy dog. Compared with these two situations, there are some little wizards whose brooms are like dead pigs that are not afraid of boiling water, and they will not move no matter how much they are shouted. For example, the honest boy Neville, and Bourne. Of course, their situations are slightly different. Neville continued to shout after failing to do so, and there were some beads of sweat on his forehead. But Bourne failed, so he simply picked the broom with his toes and took it into his hand. When Mrs. Hooch saw this scene, she originally wanted to criticize Bourne, but in the next second, Bourne put the broomstick back on the lawn. Then, he gave the command again, and the broomstick jumped into his hand very obediently. "Bourne, how did you do it?" Neville asked quickly. He wanted to know the secret to Bourne's second success. Bourne is not a person who likes to hide his secrets, not to mention Neville is an honest person, so he directly shared his secret. "It's very simple, I just said to the broom, 'You look very disloyal.' When threatened, it became much more obedient. These flying broomsticks are a bit too old, rather than flying tools, it might be more appropriate to define them as antiques. The remaining magical activity of the materials used to make them varies, and our 2 broomsticks should be among the dullest of that batch. Therefore, you have to give it a little push and motivation so that they can have the motivation to continue working for you." "Thank you," Neville said with a grateful expression on his face as he thanked Bourne seriously. Then, the child squatted down and whispered to his broomstick, "You have to be good. If you don't, I will take you to the potions classroom. Professor Snape may burn you like firewood." Dropped. How to say? It really lives up to the saying, lies won't hurt, but the truth is the sharpest knife. The truth told by honest people is often the most deadly. After being violently provoked, the broomstick immediately became well behaved, and just like Bourne, it immediately jumped into Neville's hand with just a greeting. 1 spreads to 10, 10 spreads to hundreds, person to person spreads. Bourne's little trick helped the little wizards who encountered the same problem as him quickly get out of trouble. Very good. Seeing that all the little wizards successfully summoned their broomsticks, she took out a pocket watch from her pocket and checked the time. Mrs. Huochi found that the time it took for these students to complete this step hit a record low. So, she once again showed her straightforward character and gave Bourne 5 more academy points in public. 1 point is for his ability to calmly analyze and find a solution to the problem of the broomstick being difficult to call, the other 4 points are for his willingness to share the method with his classmates, showing the excellent quality of unity. Remember, everyone thinking in one place and working hard is the most important secret to winning for a Quidditch team. Then, Mrs. Hooch began to instruct the little wizards on how to sit on the broomstick correctly and sit firmly. This is actually very critical. At the beginning, the flying speed of a broomstick is usually not too fast. To make some emergency movements in the air, you can actually complete it just by clamping the broom handle with your legs. However, with each generation of version updates, more and more high-speed broomsticks appeared. The wizards gradually discovered a very troublesome thing. If they are not careful while flying, they may always whisper a stick education with a full pain value. If not, they may even get beaten. It was not until 1820 that Elio invented a spell called the cushion curse that solved this problem. The addition of the cushion curse, coupled with the metal pedals invented at the same time, not only greatly enhanced the riding comfort, but also allowed those broom craftsmen or companies to boldly start broomstick racing competitions. The only problem is that the cushion formed by the cushion charm is invisible, and the user of the broomstick must find its position in advance. First look, second touch, third sense, Mrs. Hooch told the little wizards how to find the invisible cushion. She also explained to them why Quidditch players should have their own exclusive broomsticks. In the fierce Quidditch game, in the Dike game, players may have to make 2 or 3 maneuvers in a few seconds. Sometimes they have to operate with one hand, or even let go of both hands and just rely on their legs to control the broom flight, so they must be familiar with their own skills. Flying broomstick, in case you get hit by your own broom and have to leave the game. The little wizards listened attentively. But at this moment, Harry suddenly felt another stinging pain on his forehead, and he let out a slight ouch involuntarily. Chapter 47. The lawn where his flying lessons were held was located near Gryffindor Tower. Not far away, one could see the sparkling Black Lake and the forbidden forest adjacent to the lake. In order to divide the area, a large bush half as tall as a man was planted on the edge of the lawn. When the breeze blew, there was a rustling sound of leaves in the bush, and the smell of ripe berries could be smelled in the air. Bourne, who was about to get on the broomstick, suddenly twitched his nose twice. Why is there a little more smell? As the grandson of a potion master, his sense of smell has naturally been specially cultivated, so his sensitivity has become far beyond that of ordinary people. At this moment, he heard a slight cry of pain coming from beside him again. It was Harry who was crying in pain. And as if this was a signal, a bunch of strange things rolled out of the bushes at the same time, there were more than 20 by visual inspection, pomegranate-colored cabbages. They either rolled all the way, or jumped by relying on the expansion and contraction blades, and surrounded the little wizards. What is this? Bourne didn't recognize them and wasn't even sure whether they were animals or plants. Not to mention him, even Mrs. Huoqi, who teaches flying lessons, looked confused when she looked at these round balls. To everyone's surprise, Neville, who seemed like a naive boy in the past, was the first person present to recognize what this thing was. Everyone, be careful. This is biting cabbage. Neville loudly reminded his friends around him. Biting cabbage was originally a magical plant native to the Mediterranean area, but because it was later spread to the east and then spread back to Europe via the Silk Road. However, even though they look round and resemble iron-eating beasts in the plant world, they are actually quite dangerous magical plants. European wizards first introduced biting cabbage. They actually wanted to use this magical plant to clean up the goblins breeding in the fields. But in the end they discovered that biting cabbage would eat up the gnomes, but they would also chew up other crops in the field. Even when mature, biting cabbage will attack all animals and plants it encounters, including the wizard who planted them. Many of the wizards who first planted biting cabbage had their fingers or toes bitten off due to improper handling, and had to go to St. Mungo's to spend money to restore them. Although Neville has issued a reminder, there are still some in this group of young wizards who do not take it seriously, such as Zabanai Brace. Neville, you little crybaby is just some cabbage with legs, and you are actually afraid of them. He made a face at Neville, then raised his foot and kicked one of them that rolled near him. The bite of kale. Bang! The biting cabbage was kicked away by Zabanai. That's it. Seeing this scene, the little wizard who was originally nervous because of Neville's shout also began to feel that these biting cabbages were nothing more than that. However, the next second, they were horrified to see the biting cabbage kicked away, suddenly revealing a big mouth with thick fangs hidden in the heart of the cabbage. Because the blades had been fully opened at this time, its flight trajectory in mid-air turned sharply downwards, and fell towards Draco Malfoy's head. There are many obstacles. At the critical moment, it was Mrs. Hooch who took action in time and used a barrier spell to eject the biting cabbage. This prevented the ending of the little Malfoy's previous story from becoming a reality. He almost became almost dead. Head Nick. Draco shrank his neck in fear, and then looked at his Slytherin classmate Zabanai fiercely. Crabbe and Goyle, who were standing next to him, were also gearing up and glaring at Zabanai fiercely, as if they would rush over to teach this guy a lesson as soon as Draco spoke. Flying lessons are suspended, all of you should return to the castle quickly, Mrs. Hooch's words relieved Zabanai. Seeing that the situation was not going well, the little naughty boy turned around and ran away, and the other little snakes and little lions followed suit and spread their legs. But at this time, something suddenly went wrong. The biting cabbage, which was kicked for no reason and then bounced away by the obstacle spell, seemed to have fallen into some kind of violent mode. It seemed to have identified Draco, opening its mouth wide and pounced on the little wizard. Although Mrs. Huoqi could always use the obstacle spell to stop it in time, the biting cabbage's behavior of targeting one person also left the witch free to organize the students to evacuate in an orderly manner. Moreover, Draco, who was constantly being attacked, could hardly leave the place. Goyle and Crabbe wanted to help, so they picked up their broomsticks and used them as weapons to hit the biting cabbage. However, within a few hits of the two broomsticks, all the biting cabbage was broken into several pieces. Help! Draco screamed in horror. Bourne, who had already turned around to return to the castle with the other Gryffindor lion cubs, heard the voice and looked back. He immediately turned around and prepared to rescue Draco. A few days ago, when the Slytherin Quidditch team bullied him, Draco not only reminded him quietly beforehand, but also secretly called in Snake. Professor Pu wanted to save him. Although he is not afraid of school violence, Bourne has always responded with kindness to others for helping him. What's going on with you? Don't go there, hurry up. The running Bourne passed by quickly, and when she saw that the child not only did not leave the lawn, but rushed towards Draco, Mrs. Hooch couldn't help but feel angry and anxious. It didn't matter that she was anxious, but the rhythm of the spell was interrupted, and the obstacle spell she had just cast on Draco lost its effectiveness. The big, clicking mouth biting the cabbage was now less than 10 centimeters away from Draco's pale face. Ah! Draco screamed again. However, something unexpected happened to everyone. A long tongue suddenly appeared from the air, grabbed the biting cabbage with a swish, and then carried it with lightning speed. The biting cabbage shrank back, and the biting cabbage was swallowed into the mouth by a large golden-backed toad with dark golden stripes on its back. "Lifu, it's you. Oh, by the way, I forgot to leave food for you." No wonder the memory ball turns red. Bourne heard Neville's excited shouts from behind. The fat little wizard also ran back, and he recognized at a glance that the big toad that had swallowed the biting cabbage that attacked Malfoy was his pet Leaf, who had been placed in the dormitory but had forgotten to leave food. Cuckoo! The big toad, which had been following Neville for 3 days and 9 meals, gave its little master a very humane look, and then made a loud croak by inflating its membranes. It's not a rant. It compresses the air and bites to crush the biting cabbage in its mouth and then swallow it. Little Malfoy, why don't you thank Neville quickly? It was his pet that saved you. Ron, who was running back with Neville, now started a provocative conversation with Draco. In fact, when they saw Bourne turning his head to save people, everyone left in their dormitory, Ron, Harry, Seamus, and Neville, although they could not understand why Bourne would save Malfoy, they all immediately ran back together to help. Chapter 48. Those biting cabbages opened their big mouths and started jumping around to attack them. Several little wizards kicked and kicked to stop them. However, this group of biting cabbage is really fierce, and there are many of them. Even if they can't bite these little wizards, they will try to bite the broomsticks they ride on. Ron's broom was the first to be hit, and his tail was chewed by a biting cabbage. The already very old flying broom immediately lost control and threw Ron onto the grass. Although Ron was not injured because he was close to the ground, as soon as he landed, the biting cabbage around him rushed towards him like sharks that smelled blood. Just when he was so frightened that he closed his eyes and waved his hands in despair, trying to stop these terrifying magical plants, a muffled bang brought Ron back to reality. The expected pain did not appear. Bourne controlled the broomstick with one hand, and held a triangular prism-shaped crimson bat in the other hand, standing in front of Ron. Triple speed! Ron immediately shouted in surprise, and at the same time, Bourne also started his performance. Because Horace was not keen on Quidditch, Bourne really didn't have much exposure to broomsticks when he was a child. But this does not mean that he does not have similar experience. In the Warhammer universe for so many years, he has not only dealt with the Sons of Khan from the White Scars chapter, but also often went to Huo to those who were not very good because he was in a bad mood. Bean sprouts for people. If you want to participate in these two social activities, it is inevitable that Bourne's drag racing skills have been repeatedly tempered. Whether it's a jet motorcycle or a hover bike, Bourne is an excellent rider. It's time to show your loyalty, Bourne said softly to the broomstick. Then, he leaned forward and launched a reverse charge at the group of crazy biting cabbage. He held the triple speed with his right hand like a chainsword, and in one fell swoop he hit another biting cabbage. The bat made of the Whomping Willow is worthy of the same model as the legendary Quidditch star. One hit turns the vicious biting cabbage into a hand-shredded cabbage. Several biting cabbages rushed towards him from all directions at the same time. Bourne clamped the broomstick with both legs, then moved his left hand clockwise, and the broomstick immediately made a 360-degree spin on the spot. There was no need to deliberately aim. Triple speed drew a wavy arc, hitting them all easily and freely. Bang, 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 bang. A total of 7 biting cabbages were exploded in the air, and a large hole was immediately opened in the encirclement. Bourne's broom came out of the hole with a whoosh. Go back to the castle? Now that the show has begun, Bourne is not prepared to end it so casually. Riding a broomstick and turning a large arc like a motorcycle, Bourne came across a biting cabbage. As soon as it opened its mouth, it was hit by the 3-speed stick into its throat. Next, as if playing with a snake, Bourne was playing with the snakes against the grass, one after another, making the biting cabbage realize that they had made a big mistake by running out of the ground today. It took Bourne less than 2 minutes to clear the grass. This was not only because of his skillful driving skills, but also because he realized the importance of loyalty on the broomstick, and the triple-speed bat also made great contributions. Not to mention, this bat is really easy to use. Bourne picked up the triple speed and looked at it repeatedly. It had just been chewed by a few biting cabbage, but there was not even a tooth mark on it. Not left. At this moment, Bourne's intuition suddenly warned him, and he immediately controlled the broomstick and rushed forward a lot. A cauldron filled with orange-red slime suddenly appeared from mid-air and splashed towards Bourne. Fortunately, Bourne hid quickly, and only a small amount of mucus hit the branch at the tail of his broomstick. As soon as it came into contact, the mucus reacted with the wood, dehydrating and carbonizing the wood like concentrated sulfuric acid, making a hissing sound and emitting a cloud of smoke. Piggy! A sharp cry came from the door of Hogwarts Castle. You, how dare you do this? The person who asked the question was none other than Quirrell, the Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts. He stood in front of a group of little wizards, like an old hen guarding its chicks, guarding the frightened students behind him. At this time, under the sunlight, his whole body seemed to be rimmed with gold. Professor, do something quickly, Bourne and the others are in danger. The little witch Hermione was standing next to Quirrell and said anxiously to the professor. As soon as she ran into the castle, she immediately wanted to find Professor McGonagall, but when she met Quirrell on the stairs, she immediately changed her mind. Let go, don't worry. Quirrell said, and cast a spell with his wand, appear quickly. The moment the spell took effect, Peeves, who had been invisible above the lawn, revealed himself, still wearing that ridiculous plaid suit, but he was holding an empty cauldron in his hand. Quirrell pointed his wand at Peeves. While walking towards him, he waved to Bourne and the others to run over quickly and hide behind him. Relax, don't worry, I'm here, he. However, before he could finish his words, Bourne was like an enraged bull, recklessly controlling the broken broom and flying towards Peeves. Do you still remember what happened that day? Before he finished speaking, he swung triple speed hard and hit Peeves on the head. 1. Peeves was knocked upside down and flew out. Immediately afterwards, Bourne pursued him arrogantly and hit Peeves on the head again. At this moment, he was like the Quidditch star who used the same bat. When victory was hopeless, he became angry and attacked his opponent, with a headshot. 2. 3. 13. Finally, after being hit with a headshot for the 13th time, Peeves couldn't bear it any longer. With an ouch, he covered his swollen head like a pagoda and fled towards the Hogwarts castle. Quirrell, who had acted like a good teacher who cared for his students just now, was stunned when he saw this scene. It wasn't until Bourne landed on the lawn controlling the rickety broom that he recovered. Slughorn. Bourne, are you injured? Before Quirrell could finish speaking, a strong voice interrupted him. Professor McGonagall is here. She pushed Quirrell out of the way, walked over quickly, reached out and grabbed Bourne's arms. Behind him were Harry, who was still in shock, and Ms. Huochi, the flying instructor. Seeing that Professor McGonagall was examining Bourne, the witch with a pair of eagle eyes took care of several other little wizards. Although a series of accidents had just happened, unexpectedly, these little wizards felt very excited. They pieced together what happened at that time from several professors. Harry flew away in a whoosh. Seamus put his left hand on his hips, took a step forward with his right foot, and put his fingers together in a gesture popular among aircraft carrier pilots. Our brooms were also out of control. Ron shrugged helplessly and added, I was the most unlucky, the broom was directly bitten by the biting cabbage, and I fell to the ground. Thanks to Bourne. Seamus showed that he was no less potential as a Quidditch commentator than Lee Jordan in the 3rd grade. He swooped down with a Loney's feint, lifted up his clothes and took out a with the stick, smashed the biting cabbage that bit Ron into pieces. Not only Gryffindor, but also the Slytherin trio also recognized Bourne's contribution. Draco said, those disgusting cabbage, biting cabbage, Bourne picked them up all by himself, and he saved us all. In the end, he did not forget to defend Bourne. Bourne beat Peeves, and if you ask me, Peeves deserved it. I will tell our Slytherin ghost Bloody Baylor when I get back that Peeves is getting more and more outrageous. First, he found so many dangerous magical plants from nowhere and used them to attack the students who were in class. After the failure, he actually dared to sneak up on him secretly and use the big pot of unknown stuff to pour it on Bourne from the sky. Goyle and Crabbe, although speaking awkwardly, could still nod. They both echoed Draco's words. In that case, I won't deduct points from you for beating the Hogwarts ghost. Besides, as the vice principal, McGonagall had the unquestionable final say among the 3 teachers present. For your ability to turn around and help other students, and for your resourcefulness and bravery in dealing with those biting cabbages with the bat, I have decided to give you and Gryffindor House 20 points for these 2 things. After saying that, Professor McGonagall looked at the other 2 professors, and the meaning in his eyes was very clear, who is in favor and who is against. Mrs. Huochi thinks it is very reasonable. Quirrell didn't even dare to have any objections. So, this matter ended with Gryffindor plus 20 points for the time being. After hearing the news, the Gryffindor students were extremely happy. The gem hourglass in the hall that kept score did not lie. When Bourne walked into the castle gate, they immediately surrounded him, lifted Bourne up and threw him high and then caught him, noisily for a long time. For the sake of Professor McGonagall, even the castle administrator Filch rarely pretended not to see the scene when he passed by. When the Weasley twins arrived, Gryffindor's impromptu celebration suddenly reached a small climax. George said excitedly, "You know, Bourne, this is probably the first time someone has taught Peeves a lesson with a fist. This is so cool. He was beaten 13 times. Fred was also very excited. Peeves was their old rival. "How did you do that?" Bourne replied with a smile, "It's simple, because 13 is a sacred number. If you believe it, you can do it too." The twins looked at each other. "I didn't understand it, but that's okay." The two optimistic little wizards laughed haha, worked together to lift Bourne onto their shoulders, and led the joyful Gryffindors towards the banquet hall like a parade. Chapter 49. The night is as cold as water. Unlike the day, which is filled with the laughter of young wizards, Hogwarts at night is only a paradise for a few people. Another little wizard. The fat lady yawned, looking sleepily at the figure who had just walked out of the Gryffindor common room. At this time, Bourne had already quickly ran down the stairs. He had a date tonight. Arriving at the corridor on the second floor of the castle, leaning against the slightly chilly sandstone wall, Bourne squinted his eyes and began to wait quietly. Tick, tick, tick. Not far away, in the abandoned girls' bathroom, there was suddenly the sound of water dripping from the faucet. A gust of night wind blew through the windows on the side of the castle corridor, lifting the hanging dark velvet curtains. The atmosphere became a little weird. Just like a classic scene in a horror movie, every time a monster appears, the quiet environment around the protagonist will always have a ripple. Bourne's eyes suddenly opened. Oh! Justice's fist hit something at once, and immediately after, an ouch sound sounded in the air. Peeves was revealed with a bandage on his head and his nose covered. He stared viciously at the little wizard in front of him as if he were looking at an enemy. Peeves can feel pain, but he is a poltergeist after all, not a human being, and his nose did not bleed even after being hit. He straightened his crooked nose with force, and then asked, "You brat, how did you find me?" "Taste," Bourne replied. Peeves raised his arm and smelled it strangely, but he couldn't smell anything at all. Funny? Can a ghost be human? He felt that this brat was deceiving him. In fact, Bourne really didn't lie to him, he really had a smell about him. For those 13 blows in the afternoon, Bourne not only used the new equipment given to him by Grandpa Horace, he also secretly rubbed a layer of stuff on triple speed. That's right, the liquefied patroness charm potion. In the afternoon, the moment Peeves appeared, Bourne discovered something was wrong with this Hogwarts companion spirit. Even though the mischievous behavior was still so excessive, Peeves shouldn't be so quiet. After he appeared, he didn't even shout the catchphrase "You're Mr. Peeves." What's more, when he was still invisible, the first person to expose him was the Two-Face Man. Therefore, Bourne immediately guessed that Peeves was being manipulated, and immediately made the decision to help this guy. Be kind to others. Although it is unclear how to release this control, Peeves has one advantage: he is not a human and there is no risk of dying. At best, he will dissipate. Bourne can act with confidence and boldness. So, taking advantage of the opportunity to turn his back to Professor Quirrell, he quickly applied a layer of liquefied patroness curse potion to triple speed, and continuously tapped the sacred number 13 on Peeves' head. Whether it was physics, magic, or the number 13 that played a role, in short, Peeves was figured out. He's even gotten a little smarter. Peeves understood the meaning of Bourne's sentence "I still remember what happened that day" and came to the place where they first met on time at 1 o'clock in the middle of the night to keep the appointment. Originally, he had just been hell-bent on scaring Bourne to make up for the loss of face. But who would have thought that he would get punched again? Bourne would not tell him that because his head was stained with the liquefied patroness charm potion, whenever Bourne saw him these days, he would definitely be able to smell the smell of promethium fuel that made him feel at ease. "Tell me, brat, what do you want to do with me?" Rarely, Peeves did not use his exaggerated speaking style, but asked Bourne very seriously. Upon hearing these words, Bourne, who was still leaning against the wall, suddenly stood up straight. Master Peeves of Hogwarts. The ghost with the most special origin in the Millennium Magic School. The king of pranks spoken by generations of little wizards. Just today, he was manipulated by someone. Bourne looked at Peeves with a smile. I wonder, should he be angry? Wandering and adventuring in the dark universe, Bourne not only developed the ability to kill enemies on the battlefield, he also learned strategic games. The enemies of your enemy, although they cannot be defined as friends in the strict sense, can be a sharp blade. After reaching a temporary cooperation agreement with Peeves, Bourne returned to Gryffindor Tower, and when he got into the secret door hidden behind the fat lady's portrait, he even said hello to the fat lady. Unable to sleep due to the little wizard coming and going, the fat lady said she was already considering whether to find another place to rest at night. Returning to the dormitory, Bourne found that 2 more 4-poster beds were empty. It seemed that Ron and Harry had also begun their night travel adventure. However, their night outing may not have been as smooth as Bourne's, because the next day Bourne discovered that the Harrow duo seemed to be having trouble with Miss Beaver Hermione. After returning from morning exercise and having breakfast in the Great Hall, Bourne saw Harry and Ron whispering together, while Hermione, who usually played well with them, was sitting far away from them. She ate her oatmeal with a spoon and flipped through the textbook that stood in front of her. Bourne. As soon as he saw him appearing, Ron immediately waved his hand towards him, inviting Bourne to sit next to him. Bourne turned him down. Because although the Gryffindor freshman had no classes today, he had his own plans. He just took a little food to eat, and then immediately went to the library to find Mrs. Pants. He is going to apply for a think tank job. Oh no, it's the little librarian. When Bourne handed his application form for library assistant to Mrs. Pants, this witch who always had a strict reputation among the young wizards of Hogwarts immediately cast a cautious look on him. Mrs. Pants did not reject him directly, but asked in a slightly surprised tone, "Are you willing to come to the library to volunteer at noon every day? Is this true?" "That's right," Bourne nodded affirmatively. "I read in A History of Hogwarts that the Library of Hogwarts once had similar positions. In history, many young wizards were served in the library. However, no one has applied for this position for more than 60 years. Mrs. Pants responded, "Because not only does it not have any reward, whether it is a galleon's reward or the privilege of opening the Forbidden Book area, it also has special benefits for the little wizard. Strict requirements. Are you really willing to do this? I would be honored to have Wisdom as my neighbor." "Weird child, I heard that you made quite a fuss during the sorting ceremony. I suspect that you should be sorted into Ravenclaw." Mrs. Pants had a favorable impression of Bourne. Therefore, she did not reject Bourne's application directly, but wrote a note with a feather pen. Then, she picked up the feather duster on the library counter and flicked it, turning it into a magic wand. Mrs. Pants tapped her wand on the counter. Immediately, the Hogwarts badge on the counter opened outwards, and a brass metal pipe protruded from it. Whoosh! With the sound of the rapid flow of air, a metal capsule about the same thickness as a copper pipe jumped out of the tube. Catching the metal capsule, Mrs. Pants twisted it from the center and put the written note inside. Then, she closed the metal capsule again and stuffed it back into the brass tube. "Little wizard, I agree to your application, but the final decision is not mine. I can tell you a little secret. Every position in Hogwarts, even the position of Principal Dumbledore, is determined by this 1000-year-old castle itself. Therefore, after submitting your application, you may." Before she could finish her sentence, another metal capsule popped out of the brass tube with a whoosh. Mrs. Pants caught it in surprise and opened it. There was only a small card inside, and there was only one word on this small card: "Agree." Chapter 50. Hogwarts Castle accepted Bourne. Of course, Bourne also has his own plans. Not only because he saw Quirrell's book borrowing record that day, it made him think that he could use the two-faced professor's book borrowing information to track the progress of his and Voldemort's plans. Part of the reason is that Bourne wanted to analyze and find out the reasons for the mutation of the magic spell he used by reading a lot of books. The psychic lightning-like turn everything to stone is indeed very powerful and the effect is very cool, but it is just a magic spell, and Bourne does not think that it is a good thing that all the magic spells he has learned mutate. As an Astartes, he can naturally understand the phrase uncontrolled power often means uncontrolled risks. If he wants to study the proposition why curses mutate, he must add a lot of theoretical magical knowledge, and the Library of Hogwarts is undoubtedly a good tool. And if he wants to truly learn to use this tool, he must also light up another prerequisite, understanding how magic books are classified. In Muggle society, library classification is a professional subject, with professional methods such as the Dewey Decimal System. Books from the Wizarding Society, especially some magic books, are difficult to classify and manage using the classification methods of Muggle books. For example, the tales of the poet Pidgeot could have been read as a book of prophecies many years ago, but as the prophecies in it were realized one by one, it gradually turned into a book of fairy tales. For another example, Walking with Trolls, which was on Flourish and Blott's bestseller list this year, can actually be viewed as a special reference book on trolls, a magical animal. Similar examples abound. These are only books related to magic. There are also some books with magic in the wizard's library. There are many explanations and tips on how to put them into categories and place them in the right place. And a very large library like the Hogwarts Library has a special alchemy tool. This is the Mirror of Arist. Mrs. Pants took Bourne to a lounge behind the lending counter, which was never open to young wizards visiting the library. She pointed to a tall object covered by a velvet cloth and introduced it to Bourne. Because it was covered by the velvet cloth, Bourne could only see the two animal foot-shaped pillars exposed from under the magic mirror. Mrs. Pants took off part of the cloth, still covering the mirror, but revealing the frame of the mirror. Ariststra eruoid u bekafruoid on wosi. Bourne saw a passage on the frame, but immediately realized that it was mirror text and that the sentence should be read upside down. I show not your face but your heart's desire. What I show is not your face but your desire. Mrs. Pants explained, this sentence was actually engraved by later generations, by some little wizard or professor with evil taste. However, it does explain the purpose of this magic mirror in the eyes of most people. If people use it as a dressing mirror, they can only see what they want most. In fact, using the mirror in this way can cause far more harm than good. Many people waste time in front of the mirror and become detached from reality. They are obsessed with the illusory scene they see and are unable or unwilling to accept that it is just a fantasy. Some people are even driven crazy by the mirror images they see, because those scenes only exist in the mirror frame but they cannot realize them. Its real function is to distinguish and identify magic knowledge. Put a magic book in front of the mirror, and you can see what kind of bookshelf it should be placed on and which magic books should be placed together. Bourne chewed on Mrs. Pants's words and suddenly thought of a question. I'm afraid this magic mirror was not originally called the Arist mirror, but the magic mirror of Eris. Eris is the goddess who specializes in disputes and discord in ancient Greek mythology. Legend has it that she threw the golden apple engraved with the words to the most beautiful, which triggered a series of subsequent troubles. You are indeed very smart. Mrs. Pants took a deep look at Bourne. She really didn't expect that a young wizard could have such extensive knowledge, sharp intuition, and exaggerated association ability. Who made this magic mirror has indeed been so long ago that it is impossible to verify it, and no one has specifically verified it. But you guessed it right. When this magic mirror first appeared, it did cause a series of disputes and discord in that era. At that time, it was the era when the wizard community was gradually forming. Wizards from all over the world began to know each other and began to exchange their own cultural and magical knowledge with each other. As for this magical knowledge, due to cultural differences, it is actually difficult for wizards and wizards to understand each other. For example, some hybrid experiments on some magical animals that seem normal today are outright black magic in the eyes of some wizards and must be resisted. The person who made this magic mirror may have the idea of summarizing magic knowledge and classifying it systematically. However, after he made this magic mirror, many wizards came to this magic mirror for fair testing with their magic research topics. The results of the magic mirror appraisal were naturally mixed for the appraiser, and triggered a series of more intense controversies. But now, the knowledge building of magic has been basically established, and most wizards have reached a conceptual consensus. As she spoke, Mrs. Pants took out a book from a wicker basket on the ground. The title was Gilderoy Lockhart Teaches You How to Get Rid of Pests from Your Home. She pulled Bourne and asked him to stand beside her, and they both stood beside the mirror of Arist. Then, the witch lifted all the velvet cloth covering the magic mirror and raised the book in her hand in front of the mirror. Bourne saw from the side of the mirror that the book Gilderoy Lockhart Teaches You How to Rid Your Home of Pests was placed on an oak bookshelf. Its origins, you can expel more than just muggles. You see, Mrs. Pants said to Bourne with some pride. This is the correct way to use this magic mirror. However, she then changed the topic, and the only way to use it. Mr. Slughorn, I must formally remind you that if I see you once addicted to standing in front of this mirror, then you will be kicked out and you will never be able to enter the library again. As it should be. Bourne replied decisively, with a very serious attitude and without any hesitation. What are the consequences of indulging in false hopes and desires? In the history of the Warhammer universe, the bean sprouts have opened enough eyes for all those who come after them at the expense of race and civilization. Moreover, Bourne himself has always believed that the use of tools must be controlled by people. If the reverse is true, when tools start to use people, this tool must be destroyed, otherwise it may lead to an Iron Man rebellion. The next day, since Bourne had no classes today, he kept familiarizing himself with his job. Many students who come to the library to study or read have noticed that there is such a little wizard holding some books and frequently shuttles between the bookshelves. "Bourne, what were you doing in the library this morning?" Hermione asked Bourne directly when they went to the auditorium to eat at noon. Bourne truthfully told the story that he had successfully applied to become the assistant librarian of the Hogwarts Library, and that he had to help Mrs. Pants organize the books every noon. Of course, he did not talk about the special application mechanism for this position or anything about the Mirror of Erist. The librarian's assistant was required by contract to keep this secret. What? There are actually hidden positions in Hogwarts? Hermione was shocked, and a little jealousy inevitably arose in her heart. In fact, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry has a history of thousands of years. Let alone just 7 years, I am afraid that even Principal Dumbledore may not know all the secrets hidden in the castle. Throwing the last dragon tartar meatball into his mouth, Bourne didn't care about the image, but chewed it for efficiency while talking. The more you try, the more you will find something. Of course, it would be best if you can do it without breaking the school rules. Come on, I'm optimistic about you. After saying that, Bourne cast a clean-up spell on himself. This was a spell that Mrs. Pants specifically asked Bourne to learn today, perhaps because of reading Lockhart's book. "Bourne, there is no variation in this household spell I learned." After saying goodbye to Hermione, Bourne hurriedly left the school hall and returned to work. He still had more than 100 books to sort today. On the way to the library, he happened to meet Peeves on the stairs. He didn't say much. In the eyes of the little wizards around them, they were enemies who are jealous when they meet. Peeves threw a paper ball at Bourne without saying a word. Then, the mischievous ghost turned around and ran away while laughing wildly. Only when passing through a deserted corridor, Bourne threw some torn pieces of paper into a burning alcove. "I'm taking advantage of my short lunch break and have to go to Hogsmeade. Who are you suspicious of?" Chapter 51. In the common room, Harry, Ron, and some other little lions were gathering together to chat about all the interesting things that happened today. Although Harry lost control of his broom during flying class yesterday, he also showed amazing flying talent as a blessing in disguise. Professor McGonagall specially recruited him to the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Ron told Harry how excellent and professional the Nimbus 2000 was. It was 100 times better than his Comet Series Collector's Edition that Malfoy often boasted about. Unlike the excitement of these people, Bourne, who had been working as a librarian for a day, just turned over a magazine with one gloved hand and read quietly. Only occasionally would he use his other hand to pick up a biscuit from a small tray, bring it to his mouth, and then chew it slowly. In animagus form, the wizard will have exactly the same characteristics as the animal he transforms into. This change is like giving the wizard an extra animal soul. It is precisely because of this that I have a reason I believe that the wizard's theory of spiritual and physical integration is correct. But at present, there is still a lack of enough case support to use animagus to test this theory. After all, the number of wizards who can learn animagus is pitifully small. This was an article published in a previous issue of Advanced Transfiguration magazine. Bourne did not fully understand the content, but he still insisted on reading the entire article carefully. While sorting books today, by coincidence, Bourne discovered another way to use the Mirror of Erist. At that time, he was thinking about the issue of his mutation spell, and he clearly didn't have a book in his hand. However, just as he happened to look at the magic mirror from a safe angle, Bourne discovered that he had this magazine in his hand in the mirror. Bourne was shocked. Because, Astartes will be sufficiently vigilant about things that can read their own brain thoughts. In fact, after the incident, Bourne made a purity mark on the spot. While Mrs. Pants wasn't paying attention, he stuck it on the Mirror of Erist, and luckily nothing happened. After testing, he dared to find the issue of Advanced Transfiguration magazine reflected on the magic mirror, and then found this article in it that might be related to the cause of the mutation of his all-petrification curse. Sure enough, this article gave Bourne a great inspiration. Moreover, after just reading the beginning, he felt that the theory of this article might be correct. Because he is transforming into the Astartes Magus form, he can clearly feel that his soul is an Astartes. In the little wizard form, he is only an 11-year-old little wizard. And he also speculated that the reason why animagus wizards do not mutate their magic spells is because the animal souls born after their transformation are not strong enough. Being able to successfully master the animagus, rather than having an accident like recognizing oneself as an animal, shows that the souls of those wizards are strong enough to overwhelm the animal souls after the animagus transformation. Be able to clearly understand that you are a wizard. Similarly, this theory can also explain why animagus cannot turn into magical animals. The souls of magical animals are not necessarily weaker than wizards. According to legend, some wizard families have been mixed with the blood of magical animals in ancient times. The mutation of Bourne's curse is actually due to the soul generated by his Astartes Magus form, which is much more powerful than the soul of the young wizard. That's why he, in turn, was affected by the soul of Astartes when he was in the little wizard form, and then the problem of curse mutation occurred. In this way, the answer to this problem seems to have become simple: what belongs to the little wizard belongs to the little wizard, and what belongs to the Astartes belongs to the Astartes. Or, he could simply show himself as Astartes Magus and completely abandon his identity as a young wizard. But Bourne's true heart told him that he actually didn't want to do this, and he didn't want to give up any of his identities. After all, children only do multiple choice questions. He chose another solution: exercise. He needs to train himself hard, and he needs to do special training for these two souls, and this is why he eats a small plate of biscuits at night. These are no ordinary cookies. For them, Bourne made a special trip to the Hogwarts kitchen, asked the house elves working there for help, and asked them to bake these calcium biscuits for themselves individually. While kneading the dough, their ceramic and metal powders are added to the dough. If they hadn't made every effort to ensure that they would never use calcium biscuits as a prank, and that his grandfather was Horace Slughorn, the house elves would never have agreed to make such face bricks for him. After a series of arduous attempts, Bourne finally succeeded in completing the Astartes Magus with part of his organs and systems without changing the overall shape of the little wizard, several hours later at night after coming up with the solution. Change. The preset stomach and oral glands that Astartes can possess after surgical modification, as well as some matching physiological structures, have finally been partially restored in the little wizard. In order to complete this exercise, he has eaten more than a dozen calcium supplement biscuits with perseverance and courage that ordinary people cannot match. After the exercise, for safety reasons, Bourne put all the remaining cookies into a box and deliberately put the box under his bed in the dormitory. Then, he took the toiletries and went to the bathroom. But he didn't notice that shortly after he walked out of the dormitory, a small figure slipped in through the crack of the open door. "Damn little wizard, die! Die!" Scabbers the mouse, or more accurately Peter Pettigrew, ran from the common room back to his dormitory swearing, now starving. His current owner, Ron, who was too obsessed with chatting with his classmates to care about him, actually forgot to feed his pet rat dinner tonight. There was no way, Peter Pettigrew could only find something to eat for himself. He had just set his sights on the leftover biscuits that Bourne had eaten. Sniffing here and there, the mouse's sense of smell is very sensitive, so he quickly found the cardboard box hidden under Bourne's bed. Yes. Yes. The mouse stood up on its legs excitedly and rubbed its two little paws, just like humans rubbing their hands together. "This smells like the butter biscuits made by the house elves in the kitchen." Peter used his body to lift the lid of the box, and then, like a mouse discovering a granary, he climbed into the box excitedly on his hands and knees. "It's authentic." The starving Pettigrew immediately hugged a biscuit with his two front paws, opened his teeth and bit into it. His eyes were all narrowed into gaps, as if he wanted to taste the Hogwarts butter with all his heart. Wonderful texture that melts in your mouth. But what he didn't expect was that as soon as his two front teeth bit down on the biscuit, he heard a click and his front teeth shattered into several pieces. Who is so wicked as to add butter and flour to the bricks? Chapter 52. It was raining in the sky on Saturday morning, and the area around Hogwarts Castle became hazy. Bourne arrived at Professor McGonagall's office 10 minutes earlier than the agreed time, but there were still people here who had arrived earlier than him. "Good morning, Percy." He greeted his senior, the Weasley twins and Ron's biological brother. "Good morning to you too, Bourne." Percy responded to Bourne with a smile, not looking down on this junior just because he was a senior. Although people who have read the original work will have a bad impression of him, thinking that a person who watched how prefects gain power at a young age must be a hopeless official fan, but objectively speaking, Percy is actually not only is he an excellent Gryffindor, he is also remarkable in how he treats others. "I heard about your performance in the flying class. Thank you for saving my youngest brother." Percy shook hands with Bourne and said, "You are also here to participate in the transformation improvement class today, right?" Do you want to hear my feelings and thoughts about participating in the Transfiguration Club activities? Waiting is just waiting. Percy is willing to talk about his experience, and Bourne is naturally willing to listen. He started with the origin of the Transfiguration Advanced class. The prototype of this advanced class was a weekend Q&A time provided for students who continued to take the Advanced Transfiguration course after the 5th grade OWLS exam. Professor McGonagall would answer some questions for them. Difficulties encountered when writing homework. Later, it was Percy's eldest brother Bill Weasley who broke this tradition. In the 2nd grade, Bill showed his super talent and was valued by Professor McGonagall, who allowed him to sit in on the weekend quizzes of the senior class. Later, Professor McGonagall simply asked other lower grade wizards to join in, and this weekend quiz gradually turned into a cross-grade club. Regardless of grade, young wizards in the club can share their doubts and experiences in learning transfiguration at the party. Professor McGonagall will guide everyone's learning to prevent the little wizards from rashly trying to cause any danger. However, the first-year students were invited to join this club, and you have already broken Bill's record as the smallest member of the Transfiguration Club. Percy said half with emotion, half jokingly, I will definitely write to Bill later. A letter, I really want to see his expression when he received the letter. After chatting for a while, other students invited to participate in club activities also arrived here one after another. Percy and Bourne apologized and then started chatting with Ravenclaw's prefect, Penlo Cravat. Bourne found that when talking to the Ravenclaw prefect, Percy's eyes revealed the admiration that he could hardly hide. Except for Bourne, a first-year student, all those who join the club are juniors and above, and they come from different colleges. Although Professor McGonagall is the head of Gryffindor, she does not treat other houses differently because of this, not only Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, but also Slytherin seniors in the club. Many. However, compared to club members in other houses, students in Slytherin House basically only play with their own people. They revolved around a boy named Gemma Fane, a prefect in Slytherin. While chatting, the little wizards were waiting in the corridor. Professor McGonagall agreed with them that the club activity time was 9 o'clock. But at 9 o'clock, the door to the professor's office was still not open. Professor McGonagall is a punctual person, and the little wizards have rarely seen her late for class, or dragging her to class after class. Noticing this, Percy discussed with several other familiar senior wizards, and then knocked on the wooden door of the office. Tuk tuk. Professor McGonagall, I am Percy Weasley. Before Percy could finish his words, the wooden door he knocked on creaked, revealing a gap. Percy was stunned for a moment, but he finally held the door handle and pushed the door halfway into the room. Okay. Looking at the unfamiliar hallway that appeared in front of him, Percy quickly retracted his body back into the corridor and looked at the surrounding environment to confirm whether they were looking for the wrong office. That's right. Percy confirmed, this is Professor McGonagall's office. At this time, some other little wizards also came over. Penelo, the prefect of Ravenclaw, ignored Percy's dissuasion and walked into the hall that suddenly appeared behind the door of the professor's office. Will this be a test? Penelo asked curiously. She looked at the other door in the hall, just opposite the hall. It was much more imposing than the elm door in the professor's office outside. The door is covered with leather and filled with soft padding to block sound. The door handle is a lion sculpture made of polished brass, which highlights the characteristics of Gryffindor House and is lifelike. Like our Ravenclaw's eagle-beaked knocker. Percy responded to Penelo, who was actually a smart man. The questions and answers they gave the other little wizards a lot of inspiration. In the end, everyone unanimously concluded that this was a classroom quiz created by Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall can do this. The question is, how to open this door? Some people used a Joe opening, but the door remained motionless, while Ravenclaws like Penelope tried the same method they used to enter the lounge of their own house, starting with the brass lion door handle. Talking, but after talking for a long time, the lion didn't even move at all. In the end, Bourne couldn't stand it anymore. Not wanting to waste time, he directly reminded, seniors and sisters, you were invited to attend the event today. Didn't Professor McGonagall give you anything? Yes, that's the parchment. There was obviously not a word on it, but Professor McGonagall told him to bring this piece of paper with him on Saturday. He originally thought that the professor wanted him to use this piece of paper to take notes. He was also wondering, Hogwarts, none of the little wizards here are short of parchment, not counting those brought from home. There are boxes specially used to hold blank parchments in the college common room. There are house elves responsible for replenishing the supplies at any time, so students can use them as they please. Just take it as you go. However, when he deciphered the card that Grandpa Horace sent with the gift, he suddenly had some other ideas. Since it is a transfiguration club, we must use magic related to transfiguration. While guessing, Bourne took out the parchment given to him by Professor McGonagall, and some club members followed suit. They took out theirs, but some people had embarrassed looks on their faces. Either they had lost it, or they didn't bring it with them. That's right, Percy immediately figured out the key, and he also brought the parchment note with him. Execute the transfiguration spell on this parchment, and then use the conjured thing to open the door. After saying that, he looked at Bourne with encouraging eyes. Since the idea was proposed by Bourne, according to his idea, let Bourne open the door. For the students who solved this little mystery, Professor McGonagall might give him some encouragement. Mostly in the form of additional academy points. For Bourne, the big debtor, this reward would be just right. The other senior wizards also had no objections. Even Slytherin, who has always been at odds with Gryffindor, and the little snakes who are qualified to join the Professors' Club are proud of themselves, and they are not jealous of a first-year junior. Chapter 53. The answer is yes. The transformation technique can indeed transform the wizard chess pieces. Some senior students have done similar things to wizard chess for fun. However, Professor McGonagall, the master of transformation, is obviously much stronger than the little wizard, and his tricks are even more bizarre. As her wand clicked one by one, all the chess pieces on the chessboard began to transform. The king's crown has an extra ruby on it. A flagpole was erected on the castle and a flag with the Hogwarts crest was raised. The queen put on a palace dance dress and danced on the spot. The horse under the knight turned into a little lion, roaring dissatisfiedly at the knight riding on its back, and seemed to want to turn over and become the master. Those soldiers jumped off the chessboard, magnified many times in proportion, and stood in a row behind the little wizards. Material transformation, form transformation, mimetic transformation, living body transformation, and proportional transformation, these are the 5 main categories of transformation. Professor McGonagall said clearly. They are all displayed one by one on the wizard's chess alchemy item, and none of them can't produce an effect. She glanced at the thoughtful little wizards, but then the conversation changed. But I still can't say that transfiguration will definitely have an effect on alchemical items. To explain this statement, I must explain to you a profound theory of alchemy, that is, the alchemical items made by alchemists actually contain a virtual soul. When playing chess, the reason why wizard chess can give you feedback is actually because the virtual soul is directing their behavior. Transfiguration is essentially a way for wizards to use magic spells to change other things. It is an extension of the shapeshifter's will. If the shapeshifter's will is strong enough to subdue and change the virtual soul in the alchemical item, then the transfiguration spell can change the alchemical item. Otherwise, the transfiguration spell will not take effect. Like the bronze door knocker made by Ravenclaw and the sorting hat made by Gryffindor, they are all extremely powerful alchemical items. Unless they voluntarily do so, it is difficult for others to use transfiguration to change them. The bronze door knocker commemorating the founder's birthday, and the sorting hat opening its mouth to sing during the sorting ceremony are all actually because they spontaneously changed their virtual souls, and then that's what caused the change in its appearance. The content taught by Professor McGonagall was both high-end and profound, and the young wizards who participated in the Transfiguration Club listened with gusto. But just when Bourne and the others were wandering in the ocean of knowledge, a silver phoenix suddenly emerged from the wall, flew to Professor McGonagall and whispered a few words to her. After hearing these words, Professor McGonagall could only reluctantly announce to the young wizards that this club activity was over, and Dumbledore had something to ask her. Of course, the witch did not forget to leave homework for the students. In response to what I just said, everyone must submit a paper to me next week. For these top students, she did not specify the length of their papers, but just suggested that they go to the library to find more reference books. Hateful. Like other little wizards who are addicted to listening to lectures, Bourne also walked out of the office with a lot of grievance. He was not like the little snake in Slytherin who habitually complained about Dumbledore, but secretly cursed those who were looking for trouble at Hogwarts during the weekend. From a certain perspective, his intuition was indeed terrifyingly accurate, and he immediately focused on the keywords "those" and "looking for trouble." And in the current British wizarding world, if you hold these two keywords in your hand and publish a missing person notice in the Daily Prophet, you will definitely find the right one. Because before, there might have been the Death Eaters group as an alternative, but now the only answer that fits these two criteria is the Ministry of Magic. And if I have to put it more bluntly, it is this: Fudge, who had just been elected as the Minister of Magic, arrived at Hogwarts with a crowd of people shouting in front of him. Dumbledore, who felt a little headache, hurriedly found the Vice Principal. "Let's have a headache together." "Oh, no, hosting the reception. It was quite sudden, so I had to suffer for a good kid like Bourne who loves to learn. The Transfiguration office is not connected to the Gryffindor Tower or the library, so Bourne can only go down to the Great Hall and then up the stairs. Yes, the stairs in Hogwarts are so magical." As soon as he walked downstairs, he saw the group of people who were looking for nothing because they had entered the auditorium hall from the covered bridge on the side of the castle. A group of people walked into the gate of Hogwarts Castle. There were two reporter-like wizards in front of them, with wands in their mouths and cameras in their hands, constantly looking for angles to take pictures. The cameras in their hands were of a very classic style. After the spotlight flashed, curls of green smoke would burst out. They took so many photos that they turned the area at the castle gate into a fairyland on Earth. Walking in the middle of the team was Cornelius Fudge, the newly appointed Minister of Magic last year. He held the arm of the old Principal Dumbledore and walked into Hogwarts with a smile, surrounded by everyone. Following Fudge were a group of civil servants from the Ministry of Magic. Among them, there was a woman who stood out the most. This was not to say how beautiful she was. In fact, it was just the opposite. She was wearing a pink professional suit and wearing a pair of Death Barbie pink leather shoes and a pink lady's hat on top of her head. She looks to be as tall as a third-grade wizard at most. No matter how you look at it, it makes people feel funny. After entering Hogwarts Castle, the lady found the reporter's seat and said, "The air here is extremely sweet," revealing a different kind of luxury. The colleagues around her were shocked by her abrupt words, and even her old leader, Minister Fudge, was embarrassed. "Ms. Umbridge, now is not the time to lament or reminisce, hurry up and get busy with your work," Fudge ordered directly. This Umbridge is a typical Ministry of Magic bureaucrat. She loves vanity and likes to work hard. The reporters from the Daily Prophet accompanying her today were all found by her. If she hadn't always been able to pick her side accurately and be able to do the dirty work with ease, Fudge would have kicked her out of his faction long ago. When he came to Hogwarts this time, the newly appointed Minister of Magic had two main things to do. The first thing is that he needs to have a public secret meeting with Dumbledore, both to exchange interests and to express an attitude to the public. It is true that, as popular rumors say, Cornelius Fudge was able to succeed Ms. Millicent Barnold because of Dumbledore's support. However, having served as Minister of Magic for a year, Fudge felt that his position was almost secure. Therefore, he wants to express to the public that not only is he not Dumbledore's puppet, but he is the superior of the respected headmaster. Even if Cornelius Fudge had to fulfill some of the conditions he had promised privately, he still had to fulfill his promise, but he still had to show his outstanding face. The second thing, also for show, is that the Minister of Magic gave the little wizards a big gift on their boring weekend. He asked the Ministry of Magic to pay for a professional team with a magic projector to show a movie in the Great Hall of Hogwarts. "Principal Dumbledore, I promise you, this is definitely a good show." Fudge took the old wizard's arm and walked towards the principal's office while whispering with a smile on his face, "The cloth who teaches Muggle studies, Professor Beiji, should have told you, what is a movie? It's a form of entertainment invented by Muggles, not as vivid as magical portraits, but a bit like the moving portraits printed on chocolate frog cards, but lasting longer and with a richer story. I specially hired a professional magic screening team from France to show the little wizards a magic movie. What kind of wizard is Napoleon today?" Dumbledore just smiled, as if his attitude towards this matter was neither objection nor support. Upon seeing this, Minister Fudge, whose vision level reached 10th level, immediately changed the topic. "Principal Dumbledore, have the school directors started to scrimp again this year when paying for teaching funds? I heard that when the little wizards were taking flying lessons 2 days ago, they almost had a teaching accident because their brooms were old. Don't worry, when you interview the professors later, you can just ask them to boldly report their teaching budget. I will definitely go all out to help them and let those stingy school directors regain their dignity." While chatting, mainly Fudge talking, Dumbledore just listening, a group of people from the Ministry of Magic came to the principal's office on the 8th floor of Hogwarts Castle. "Why is it said continuously? This is because only Dumbledore and Fudge took the spiral staircase hidden behind the gargoyles. The others all climbed up the 8 floors and relived the scene of fighting wits and courage with these moving stairs in their school days. They even suffered from Peeves' chalkhead and wet paper ball attack. All these people have been complaining for so many years, why can't the school get rid of this annoying ghost? As for their bitterness and complaints, some people now don't have to climb the stairs, but they are full of jealousy towards these people. For example, Umbridge. She was extremely jealous now. The minister asked her to decorate the Great Hall of Hogwarts so that she could show a movie to the little wizards, which deprived her of many opportunities to be exposed to the spotlight. Damn guy, he will bully honest people. Those reporters were obviously found by me. While using her wand to cast a spell on the curtain, Umbridge kept cursing her career leader in her heart. The Minister of Magic is obviously a wizard, but he has to learn from muggles, play movies, and do cinema. It's really embarrassing for pure-blood wizards. Just as she was flipping through the little notebook in her heart and starting to comment on the rights and wrongs of her old leader one by one, a woo-woo-woo sound came from behind her. Umbridge was stunned for a moment. Why did the train come to the castle? Chapter 54. Umbridge heard correctly, but thought wrongly. Instead of a train entering Hogwarts Castle, someone was calling her name. You Umbridge, senior sister. Quirrell crossed his arms behind his back and greeted Umbridge with a smile. When she saw who was greeting her, Umbridge immediately used practical actions to demonstrate what it means to change her face in 1 second. Her gloomy expression immediately turned into a smile, and the wrinkles that had climbed up her face with age were like blooming chrysanthemums, all opening up in an instant. Quirinus, long time no see. I didn't expect that when we meet again, you would have become a professor at Hogwarts. Congratulations, congratulations. Umbridge graduated from Slytherin House, while Quirrell was a Ravenclaw student. There were several years between them. Naturally, Umbridge didn't know this nominal junior at all. At most, she had a good impression. But because she had to assist Fudge, she was quite familiar with the personnel arrangements at Hogwarts. Moreover, after working in the Ministry of Magic for many years, she already knew how to interact with decent and successful people. Congratulations to you too. Quirrell stumbled and said, after Minister Fudge was elected, didn't you also become the chief of the Minister's Secretary's office? It won't be long before the Legal Enforcement Department will have another female director in 2 or 3 years at most. These words made Umbridge's sense of this young boy change a lot. Her original compliment was just polite, but now she looked at Quirrell with a hint of real appreciation. Regardless of the wizards in Britain, the total population is estimated to be less than 20,000, and the number of wizards working in the Ministry of Magic is less than 400. But even if there is such a small circle that cannot hide any secrets, there are very few wizards who understand the 2 promotion systems of civil servants and politicians in the Ministry of Magic. In Umbridge's view, people who are willing to understand these are capable people with ambitions and ideas. Such people are basically concentrated in the Ministry of Magic. For example, herself. And Quirrell, the professor of the main course at Hogwarts, has such an awareness and has no competitive relationship with her for the time being. He is undoubtedly a suitable person to be a friend. Umbridge was laughing so hard that she couldn't help but raise her voice when she spoke. Quirrell seemed to want to get close to her, and even offered to help decorate the auditorium. He just clicked lightly with his wand, and several coiled ropes, like cobras attracted by the flute, immediately stand up from the floor, climbed to the decorations on the wall of the auditorium, and hung up the movie curtain. Then they tied themselves with many figure-8 knots that were both strong and easy to untie. Oh, impressive spell. Umbridge's exaggerated praise attracted the attention of many people, not only the little wizards passing by nearby, but also those who were busy debugging the magic projector. Several staff members. However, they only glanced at Professor Quirrell, then quickly lowered their heads and focused on playing with the projectors in their hands. Because Hogwarts Castle is protected by powerful magic, any Muggle electronic products cannot work properly here, so the projector they use is also a magical item modified by alchemy. This is the latest alchemy product that has not been tested in the market for a long time and has a certain probability of failure when used. Therefore, before showing a movie, it must be repeatedly inspected and debugged by professionals to ensure that it can operate normally. After helping Umbridge finish hanging the curtain, Quirrell walked up to them and said, Everyone, do you need any help? The first event of the Transfiguration Club ended abruptly. Bourne originally wanted to go to the library. But because of the rain, she was worried that the careless little wizard would bring mud and water into the library, which would affect the books, and because she had to rush to the principal's office to report work, she announced that the library would be temporarily closed today. In desperation, he had no choice but to prepare to return to the Gryffindor common room in frustration. Today he had to write a letter home to Grandpa Horace. Before going upstairs, Bourne took another turn and went to the Hogwarts kitchen, hoping to ask the house elf to bake some more calcium biscuits for him. However, when passing by the door of the Hufflepuff common room, he met two people who he had never expected to be here. Well, three to be precise, a young wizard, an adult, and Hagrid, the keykeeper of Hogwarts and the caretaker of the forestry. "Hi, Hagrid." Seeing an acquaintance, Bourne immediately greeted him, and at the same time he smelled a strong smell of acetic acid in the air. "Oh, it's Bourne. Are you going to the kitchen, or are you going to the Hufflepuff common room to hang out with your friends?" Hagrid responded to Bourne, but still held on to the oak barrels near the wall with both hands to prevent them from suddenly collapsing. Because there was a man kneeling on the ground at this time, getting into the middle of the oak barrels piled up against the wall, and seemed to be tinkering with something inside. In addition to Bourne, another little wizard present used a wand to release a lighting spell to provide illumination for the man who got into the gap between the oak barrels. The clothes worn by this little wizard bear the mark of Hufflepuff House. He is very tall, with black hair like a Roman and an angular face like a statue. Bourne knew him as Cedric Diggory. Except for Ron, the three Weasley brothers all mentioned this Hufflepuff genius student to him when chatting, and even the twins spoke highly of him. "Thank you, Hagrid and Cedric." The man who got into the gap between the oak barrels finished his work and got out quickly. Only then did Bourne see the man's face, so he quickly added a greeting, "Hello, Professor Kettleben." Although the first-year wizard did not have the elective course Care of Magical Creatures, he had met Kettleben during the sorting ceremony and knew that this old wizard with only one leg and one arm was also a professor at Hogwarts. "Oh, little wizard, are you going back to the Hufflepuff lounge? Don't miss the syllables of Helga Hufflepuff, otherwise." "Professor," Cedric interrupted Kettleben helplessly, "this is Bourne, he is a Gryffindor student." After saying that, he nodded to Bourne apologetically and said frankly, "I'm sorry, Bourne. The unique lounge access control is a tradition of our college, so I can't tell you too much." Bourne didn't care at all. Oh, look at my memory." Professor Kettleben scratched his chicken coop-like hair with his wooden prosthetic hand. "I remembered, you are little Bourne, the little grandson of Horace. On the day of the sorting ceremony, not only did you get more than 200 points deducted by Dumbledore, but you were also teased by the sorting hat that you were going to be sorted to AZ cabin." As soon as these words came out, no one in this corridor was not embarrassed, including Professor Kettleben himself. However, this old man is actually a very good person, very kind-hearted, very simple, and has always been very tolerant of students. Chapter 55. After hearing Hagrid's explanation, Bourne thought for a while and asked doubtfully, "Those guys who eat and drink secretly are not necessarily color-changing ghouls. In fact, there are many things that have both motivation, demand for flesh and blood, and ability, grabbing food from the mouths of the Forbidden Forest thestrals. For example, hidden monsters, rune snakes, chimeras, manticores. Moreover, these are just magical animals. If you include some magical plants and magical creatures classified into other categories, the scope may be much wider." "Well, I've actually thought about this issue you mentioned. But I still want to trust Professor Kettleburne's judgment." Hagrid scratched his beard. This big man, who was more than 3 meters tall and looked like one of his own to Bourne, said with confidence. "No one, well, maybe excluding those two Weasley rascals, knows the edge of the Forbidden Forest better than I do. Those somewhat dangerous little cuties actually all live in the deepest part of the Forbidden Forest, and there are other things around their habitats. In short, they can't escape here. Moreover, there is a group of centaurs living outside the Forbidden Forest. They have a contract with Hogwarts, and they are also responsible for cleaning up creatures and other elements that may pose a threat to the little wizards in the school. I have communicated with a friend among the centaurs before. Although they found some problems when stargazing, overall the recent hunting and life of their tribe are actually pretty good. Furthermore, if I really encounter a problem that cannot be solved with vinegar ointment, I still have this thing. Look." After saying that, he reached into the pocket of his hunting suit, which was at least 10XL in size, and took out 2 pastries he baked himself. I picked it up by mistake. This is rock cake." Hagrid smiled sheepishly, and then immediately took out a slingshot about the size of a tennis racket and some stone balls about the size of a tennis ball from another pocket. When Bourne saw the snacks Hagrid was carrying, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "Hagrid, can I try what you made?" Hagrid had a look of surprise on his face. In addition to taking care of those cuties, Hagrid's biggest hobby is baking. Not long ago, he developed this new product using baguette-making techniques. However, apart from him, the only other fan of rock biscuits is his big dog named Yeye, but he only likes to use them to grind his teeth. He quickly took out a piece of rock cake. In order to make it easier for the little wizard to taste, Hagrid specially broke it into 2 pieces and stuffed it into Bourne's hand. Bourne looked at the rock cake. This kind of pastry is made of flour and butter, and nuts are added when kneading the dough. However, he doesn't know what household magic Hagrid used to bake the rock cake. Its surface looks. It's very rough and full of cracks. Combined with its shape and color, this rock cake looks really similar. Isn't this just a large walnut cake? After taking a curious look at this famous food, he finally understood why the rock cake looked familiar to him. He put the rock cake into his mouth, took a bite, and found that it was not unpleasant to eat. It's much more delicious than amino acid oatmeal, which means it doesn't add ceramide powder, so it can't supplement what Astarte's body needs. And just when Bourne wanted to ask about the recipe and production method of Hagrid's rock biscuit, he thought it could be used to upgrade the calcium supplement biscuits to 2.0, Professor Kettleben, who was walking at the front, suddenly stopped. "We're here," he said. They had arrived at a clearing in the Forbidden Forest. This land has obviously been man-made. Except for a few beech trees that are very old and have extremely dense horizontal branches, there are no other trees growing, and some alfalfa and plantains are also planted on the ground. Bourne saw about a dozen thestrals walking on the grass in the drizzle. They had heads that resembled fire dragons, seemingly skinny but actually very strong bodies, and a pair of huge hooves that fit on their backs. "Bat wings. Can you see the thestral?" Hagrid asked in surprise, noticing where Bourne was looking. However, this forest farm guard, who has an extremely soft heart that is completely opposite to his tough guy appearance, seems to feel that he said something wrong. For a moment, he became a little embarrassed and didn't know what to say to make up for the wrong thing he just said. It was Professor Kettleben who came to the rescue. This old man, who would inevitably seem a little unreliable when we first met him, once again showed the wisdom that a professor should have. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are all human nature. He came over and patted Hagrid's somewhat helpless hand, and then looked at Bourne again. Although the thestral can only be seen by those who have witnessed death with their own eyes, this is not entirely a bad thing, because only by seeing it with their own eyes rather than reading about it in books can people better understand the magnificence of this magical animal. Some wizards believe that these creatures are very unlucky and will bring all kinds of terrible disasters to those who see them. But this is superstitious. The domesticated thestrals are very loyal, and they are very strong and can be used to pull carts. Moreover, the thestral is the fastest magical animal known to fly. Did you know that because some places cannot be reached using apparition, and using port keys generally requires registration and application at the Ministry of Magic, even our principal Dumbledore chooses to ride the thestral when he occasionally goes abroad? Well, little guys, having said all that, let's get to work. Perhaps because he realized that he had talked too much, Professor Kettleben quickly changed the subject and asked Bourne and the others to start working together. Then, the old professor first took out an oil paper bag, which contained several pieces of meat with bloodshot eyes and yellow fat. "Get bigger quickly." He cast a spell on the pieces of meat he placed on the lawn. In the eyes of everyone, these pieces of meat turned into piles of peeled goat ribs in a blink of an eye. Our thestrals at Hogwarts have 2 new little guys this year. Their teeth haven't grown yet, so they can't eat much fibrous beef, and fresh goat meat is just right. He explained it to several people, but the most important thing was to talk to Hagrid, because he usually came to the Forbidden Forest to feed the thestrals. "I have already made an agreement with Aberforth. Hagrid, just go to the Pig's Head bar and find the old man. He will provide you with fresh goat meat." After saying that, after looking at the group of thestrals that were gradually approaching, the old professor moved Cedric and Bourne behind him. "Don't be afraid, don't be nervous, and don't irritate these little guys," he whispered to the 2 students, as if giving them an extra lesson on the protection of magical creatures. Bourne saw the thestrals coming over and first touching the mountain of goat ribs with their noses. Then they bowed their knees slightly, nodded and expressed their gratitude to the group, and finally began to eat. The adult thestrals opened their mouths wide and gnawed at the ribs with their sharp teeth. They chewed the bones together and then ate them into their stomachs. They all have a tacit understanding, and while eating, they also leak, deliberately dropping some fine pieces of meat with large pieces of fat on the ground, and the two newborn thestrals, who are about a few months old, will be happy picking up food on the grass. The two little guys ate happily. However, because the pieces of meat fell into the grass, they would inevitably eat some grass and alfalfa as they ate. It turns out that it's not just humans who find ways to compete with picky children. Bourne watched with gusto. He found this scene extremely interesting. However, the Hufflepuff senior who came with him did not have such an interesting experience. In Cedric's eyes, the pile of goat ribs piled up in a hill was just being quickly devoured by invisible large mouths. Apart from the splattering of blood and minced meat, only the crunching goat bones were left. The terrible sound of breaking. "Don't be afraid," Professor Ketleben seemed to feel something and patted Cedric's arm to indicate that he shouldn't be nervous. Seeing that the thestrals were almost finished eating, he and Hagrid stepped forward and touched the skinny bodies of the little cuties. "You guys should try it too," he called Bourne and Cedric over. "By accepting the gift, it means that the thestrals have recognized us as a group of people. As long as you don't take the initiative to harm these little guys, they won't attack you. Playing with a thestral is not a cat, and it is rare to have such an opportunity." So upon hearing this, Bourne immediately ran over happily. Although Cedric hesitated a little, he followed. Because he could see the thestral, Bourne could accurately touch the neck and belly of this creature. Following Professor Kettleburn's instructions, he gently rubbed the thestral's tight muscles with his hands to help him finish eating. They promote digestion of food. Elulu. Just when Bourne was raising and lowering his hands on several adult thestrals, a rhythmic neighing suddenly sounded around him. The two thestral cubs seemed to be very interested in him, a two-legged beast who was also a cub. They came to him and chirped, while holding the sleeves of his clothes in their mouths and pulling them here and there. Unceremoniously, Bourne gave these two little guys a head touching. They also seemed to like Bourne stroking the mane on their necks, so they all lowered their necks and let Bourne continue to groom their hair. What's even more interesting is that the two little thestrals seemed to smell something. They lowered their heads and quietly put their heads into Bourne's pocket. The thestral cub, who was extremely curious, took out two uneaten rock cakes from Bourne's pocket. "Professor," upon seeing this, Bourne hurriedly asked, "Can these thestral cubs eat sweets?" Ketleben, who was communicating with a thestral with gestures that he had known for a long time, responded smoothly when he heard the question, "It's okay, they can eat those things, as long as they don't feed them too much." However, he did not look back and did not see, the two thestral cubs had clearly stole the snacks, but they only took a small bite and immediately put them back into Bourne's pocket obediently. Not only that, they also wandered around for a while, found some leftover mutton and placed it at Bourne's feet. As if to say, "You're welcome, we're treating you." Chapter 56. "I understand, that guy stole the cow's blood that was meant for the foals. The little guys haven't been eating very well these days. You are worried and angry, but the thief has never been found. It can only be said that he is indeed an expert on magical animals." Even with gestures and guesses, Ketleben can actually understand what the Astrian wants to express. He assured the leader of the thestrals, "Don't worry, we will definitely drive the thieves out of this forest, I promise you." After saying that, he patted the neck of the thestral with his remaining left hand, and the old professor led Bourne and the others to start work. Under a beech tree in this forest glade, they found the empty oak barrel used to feed the thestrals with cow's blood. The old professor first released a clean-up on the empty bucket, and then took out the vinegar paste he found from the Hufflepuff common room and spread an even layer on the inner wall of the empty bucket. Then, under the surprised eyes of Bourne and Cedric, Professor Ketleben forcefully twisted off the prosthetic limb installed on his broken arm. "This is a gift that Dumbledore gave me more than 20 years ago," he explained to the two young wizards. "He cast a traceless stretching spell inside, and it can hold many useful things." More than 20 years. After hearing this, Bourne couldn't help feeling a little shocked. Cedric's eyes widened even more, with an incredible expression on his face. "You know, the reason why the use of the invisible stretch curse is strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic is because they may suddenly fail. Unless it is made of special materials like Bourne's deformed lizard wallet, if an ordinary wizard uses it to cast a spell on something like a suitcase, it is very likely that the spell will suddenly fail at some point. If such an accident happened in the magic world, although it would be troublesome to deal with it, after all, everyone is a wizard, so it would not cause too much trouble. On the other hand, if the spell suddenly fails in front of muggles, the item enchanted with this spell will explode in an instant, the wizard will definitely violate a lot of regulations in the Statute of Secrecy. Therefore, the Ministry of Magic will not only strictly control wizards' use of the invisible stretching spell, but also requires businesses that are qualified to sell products with this spell attached to them to confirm the shelf life of the product with customers. When an ordinary wizard releases the invisible stretch spell, the effect of the spell can last for 3 or 4 years, which is actually very powerful. However, according to Professor Kettleben, the spell cast by Dumbledore lasted for more than 20 years. This endurance is so terrifying. This also made Bourne suddenly think of someone, Mephisto, who had fought alongside him and showed terrible endurance. He had personally seen the chief think tank of the Holy Blood Angels, actively embraced the Black Rage and the Red Thirst, and fought a week-long battle with the Demon Prince, the Seed of Destruction. In the end, he even let the Gurn the Demon took the initiative to escape back to the subspace. He must have been extremely scared at the time. And after the battle, the head of the think tank with incredible endurance was able to calm down 2 incurable diseases caused by genetic defects that the Blood Angels usually talk about with disdain. That's a respectable man. Even if he goes crazy, he doesn't look like a human being. After a moment of emotion, Bourne shook his head slightly, letting the long-ago memory fade away from his mind. People can't just live in the past, the road must continue to move forward. After moving several containers filled with cow blood from the hollow prosthetic limb, Professor Kettleben asked the strongest Hagrid to pour all the cow blood into the oak barrel under the beech tree. Remember to close the lid at the end. He warned Hagrid, don't use too much force when closing the wooden lid. The discolored ghouls are not very strong, and they will not be able to open the lid if it is too tight. Finally, the old professor took Bourne and Cedric to the forest glade and walked around it. Kettleben patiently taught them how to identify the animal trails in the woods, and distributed the remaining vinegar paste to the 2 young wizards, and rubbed the vinegar paste on some shrub branches and leaves on the animal trails. In this way, if the thief steals again, whether he is stealing a drink directly from the oak barrel to feed the thestral cubs, or passing through the paths in the bushes, he will be tricked once. As long as they are stained with vinegar paste, the color-changing ghouls will be tortured in the next few days, and they will definitely not dare to steal the thestrals' food again. In the Forbidden Forest, more and more raindrops fell from the gaps between the leaves. The rain became heavier, and the tops of the distant mountains were gradually shrouded in low-hanging dark clouds. It's almost time to go back now. Professor Kettleben called Hagrid over, and the group said hello to the thestrals, and then started their return journey. Before returning to the castle, considering that lunchtime had passed, Bourne asked Hagrid for some rock biscuits when he passed by Hagrid's hut. Hagrid, who loves baking, was very happy with the little wizard's request. Not only did he give Bourne a bag full of rock biscuits, but he also gave him a box of fudge he had just made yesterday. After finishing Fudge's interview and leaving Dumbledore's office, Quirrell didn't dare to take a big breath until he returned to his own office and closed the door again. His back was soaked. Every time he got close to Dumbledore, Voldemort would hide deep in his body, leaving him alone to face the powerful White Wizard. Lord, Master, why do you want me to contact those people? Quirrell asked tremblingly to the soul hidden in his body. He was referring to those people he met in the Great Hall of Hogwarts before going to the headmaster's office. If it hadn't been for Voldemort's request, he wouldn't have wanted to say even half a word to Umbridge, that old woman who looked like a toad. Hey! Voldemort let out a long laugh, feeling that the face on the back of his head was a bit suffocating. Quirrell instinctively untied the turban. Those people? Quirinus, has your memory faded? Have you forgotten what happened in Albania? No, I don't dare. Thinking that Voldemort was tricking him again, Quirrell said quickly, I will never forget that it was there that I met you, my great master. Idiot! I said before you met me. Voldemort yelled. And with this scolding, Quirrell's body involuntarily knelt on the ground. Have you forgotten that building up show? Have you forgotten those guys who stripped you naked and threw you into the forest to die? Quirrell's eyes widened in surprise. You mean, there are vampires among those people? Umbridge. No, it can't be her. This old woman has been working in the Ministry of Magic. She is one of those guys who plays with the magic projector. Hey! Quirrell's neck twisted weirdly, making a crunching sound, and Voldemort twisted his neck. They are very good at disguise. Even Dumbledore was fooled, but they can't fool me. Quirrell felt a burning pain in his forearm. He quickly rolled up his sleeves, and a pattern of a skull with a poisonous snake coiled in its mouth was twisting under the skin. The dark mark. You still have some knowledge, Voldemort snorted before explaining his origins with those vampires. Those guys were originally a group of students who were expelled from the Wagadu Magic School in Africa for studying black magic. They went to France from Africa. Later, by smuggling magical materials and organizing gangs, they quickly established a foothold in Paris. Of course, I also had my help in this. I gave them the first pot of gold to build their business, and the dark mark. After my failure, they quickly distanced themselves from me and their benefactor. Moreover, as the gang's strength increases, they actually plan to arrange for one of their own to enter the French Ministry of Magic, to become the master. Naturally, they were immediately attacked by the Aurors. However, they are also considered ruthless characters. On the eve of the gang's imminent destruction, these people actually used a vampire smuggled by them, combined with some self-transformation knowledge learned from Wagadu Magic School, to transform all the core members into vampires. The guys then fled to Albania and hid. Then, a few years later, they met you who was traveling there. I don't need to tell you what happened next, right? No, that's not necessary, Master. Quirrell replied timidly, but he also really didn't want to recall his past in Albania. That tavern was not only a turning point in his fate, but more importantly, it was also the biggest social death he experienced in his life. But, those damn monsters, what did they come to Hogwarts for? Quirrell unconsciously had personal feelings as he spoke. What else can they do? What else can thieves and robbers do? Of course it's also for the Sorcerer's Stone. Voldemort sneered. I have smelled the unique smell of death from those people, and no one knows this smell better than me. You know, becoming an inhuman monster like a vampire is not without cost, not to mention that although they are also expelled students, they are not talented students like Senior Newt Scamander, who learned from Wagadu there must be big holes in magic. Now, they probably also need the magic stone, that powerful alchemy stone to stay alive. Then, Voldemort changed the subject, however, this is also our opportunity. The bigger the mess they make, the easier it will be for us to fish in troubled waters. Great Master, but what if their actions affect us? Although Quirrell has always seemed harmless from school to becoming a professor of Muggle studies, his character actually has many flaws. Otherwise, how could he be so easily bewitched and successfully possessed by Voldemort? He was obviously unwilling to let go of the vampires who had hurt him. In front of Voldemort, Quirrell still did not give up the opportunity to give them eye drops. Chapter 57. Bourne spent the afternoon reading. As an assistant librarian, he got some preferential treatment. Mrs. Pants allowed him to borrow 10 books at a time. As long as it's not a magic book in the forbidden area. It was raining heavily outside, so a fire was lit in the fireplace in the Gryffindor common room to remove the humidity. All the other roommates in his dormitory were not there. Because it rained today, the Slytherin Quidditch team, which had already received approval from Dean Snape, actually gave up the opportunity to occupy the field for training. Therefore, Gryffindor's virtuous Captain Wood simply waved his hand and took all the team members to the Quidditch field for training in the rain. Unlike the pampered little snake, the main focus of the Gryffindor team is 1. Train when there are difficulties, train when there are no difficulties and create difficulties. Since Harry also had to train secretly today, Ron and the others followed him there early in the morning to cheer him up. For this reason, they did not even return to the castle for lunch, but relied on the bread and baked potatoes they got from the Great Hall in the morning. Even if the other Gryffindor little lions did not go to the Quidditch pitch, they would go to the school auditorium in groups to watch the excitement, or go to play with friends they knew well from other houses. Those still in the common room today are almost all senior students who have to deal with the Owls and Newt exams this year. Throughout the first grade, only Bourne, who loved learning, and Hermione, who also regarded reading as a pleasure, stayed in the common room. By the way, they were the only 2 first-year wizards who had finished their homework due next week before Saturday. Bourne has a habit of reading books. He likes to read the whole book quickly and roughly, write down the general content of the whole book, and then go back and read the parts that he has doubts about and that he feels are very important. Therefore, during rough reading, he turned the pages of the book very quickly. Even if he had tried his best to pay attention, because the books collected in the Hogwarts library were printed on high-quality paper, Bourne would still make some noise when turning the pages. For most people, this sound is nothing, but Hermione is an exception. This little witch is the kind of person who, even if she has the ability to get perfect scores during exams, will still feel her heartbeat once she realizes that there is someone around her who answers questions faster than herself. The type of person who speeds up and sweats on his head. When Hermione noticed that it only took Bourne almost half an hour to flip through a large book, she finally couldn't stand it any longer. Sitting on the velvet sofa in the lounge, Hermione would peek at Bourne from time to time to compare his reading speed with her own. As a result, the more they compared her, the more anxious she became. Not only were her legs hanging from the sofa, but unable to reach the ground, shaking faster and faster, but even her palms gradually became moist. So, Hermione moved her sweaty palms away from the book page and touched the side to find something to rub against. She touched a furry thing, but the furry thing may have to be put in quotation marks, because Hermione obviously felt that the thing was a bit numb and not particularly round. What? Turning her head to see what the thing was, the little witch immediately let out a scream, and then subconsciously threw it far away. Hermione jumped off the sofa angrily, took out her wand and used the clear water like a spring and clean up spells to repeatedly clean the palms of her hands that had just touched the mouse, as well as the water stains that fell on the ground. She felt unclean. She didn't think there was anything wrong with keeping a mouse as a pet, but Ron's scabbers always gave her a dirty feeling. She felt awkward every time she saw it, not to mention touching it with her own hands just now. It's dirty rat skin. This shout, like thunder on the ground, reignited the already quiet Gryffindor lounge. It is almost the nature of all little lions to like to join in the fun. After hearing Hermione's scream, the senior students who wanted to relax after studying for a long time couldn't help but stand up from their seats and walked over to ask the first-year little witch if she needed anything. Help! In a crowded environment, everyone is still talking and chatting. This kind of atmosphere is really not suitable for reading and studying. So Bourne simply closed the book, stood up from the soft chair near the fireplace, stretched out his arms and stretched. By the way, he also picked up some rock biscuits and jelly beans from the plate beside him and put them into his mouth to replenish the nutrients consumed by his brain. What's wrong, Hermione? He also walked towards the crowd surrounding the little witch and joined in the fun. Sorry for disturbing everyone's study. At this time, Hermione, who noticed something wrong with her, was apologizing to the classmates she had disturbed. It doesn't matter, I was just doing my homework for the 5th grade defense against the dark arts class. Professor Quirrell was teaching how to resist vampires that day, but he only taught half of the class on how to braid hair and put garlic in it to ward off evil spirits. Then I left a 7-inch long paper, and I almost fell asleep while writing it. Thanks to you for shouting and waking me up, otherwise I would have almost eaten garlic in my dream. Haha, me too, me too. The senior Gryffindor students were generally more tolerant towards the younger students, and they all offered words of comfort to Hermione, the little witch. As for Ron's rat scabbers, Hermione didn't elaborate, and no one else asked at all. By the way, I heard that a movie will be played in the auditorium tonight. After comforting Hermione for a while, a senior witch suddenly directed everyone's attention to another topic. Magic movies were first invented in North America. For wizards living in the British Isles, even though it is already 1991, it is actually a relatively new thing. As the base camp of conservatism and empiricism, wizards in Britain were also influenced by these two ideas and showed little interest in magic movies at the beginning. Many wizards believe that since there are already two kinds of magic portraits and moving pictures, the wizarding world does not need movies. Of course, some people have objections, and some people think that magic movie is like the wizard radio before it. Although it was not favored by people at the beginning, it did lead some people to success in life. For example, the famous wizard singer Celestina Warbeck, who sang "You Stood My Heart with Magic" and "A Pot of Fiery Love." Another example is Glenda Stock, the wizard anchor who has hosted the Magic Hour program for decades. It is worth mentioning that the two celebrities in the British wizarding world mentioned above all graduated from Gryffindor. Therefore, in Gryffindor, there are actually quite a lot of young wizards who are interested in this new thing called magic movies. While chatting, the little lions all became interested in the movie that was to be shown in the banquet hall tonight. Seeing that it was time for dinner, the little wizards left the common room together. Most of them decided to watch the magic movie tonight. Only Bourne was not very interested in the matter. He planned to stay and write a letter to Grandpa Horace this evening. However, before that, he was still going to the banquet hall for dinner. Although the visit of the Ministry of Magic team ruined the Transfiguration Club's activities in the morning, it was also because of them that Bourne estimated that the house elves in the Hogwarts kitchen would prepare a more sumptuous meal today than usual. Chapter 58. Because it was raining, it got dark quickly. When Bourne followed the Thestral cub into the Forbidden Forest, the quiet forest had almost become invisible. For safety reasons, Bourne completed the Astartes Magus transformation while running. The wizard's robe with a telescopic spell attached perfectly fit his body shape at this time. It's just this scene of changing into a living person that frightened the little yucky pony, whose flapping wings stopped, as if it didn't fall from the air. Fortunately, Bourne reached out to help it. "Don't be afraid, just keep flying," Bourne said softly. The reason why this little Thestral came to Bourne is because it remembered Bourne's scent. Horses have a well-developed sense of smell, and relying on their sensitive noses, they can construct a kind of image-like memory called olfactory images. As a type of Pegasus, Thestral's sense of smell is undoubtedly sharper, and they are also smarter. Therefore, when the Thestrals were in trouble, they were unable to help and immediately thought of the two-legged beasts they saw during the day, so the little Thestrals ran out to fetch reinforcements. As for why it was able to accurately find Gryffindor's tower, it's because the Thestral, a magical animal, not only flies extremely fast, but also has extraordinary guidance capabilities similar to those of an owl. The Thestral is known to be able to take wizards to the world. Famous everywhere. For example, when Dumbledore wanted to go to a certain tower, he would usually ask Hagrid to bring him a Thestral. The clever little pony picked up a grass branch with vinegar paste in its mouth, and neighed Harry a few times to express its intention. Although Bourne also doubted how a mere color-changing ghoul could cause trouble to a whole group of adult Thestrals, but seeing how the little guy kindly gave him pieces of meat in the morning, Bourne still followed him to the forbidden area. Forest. Stop yelling. I've heard the roar, and it's not like the roar of a color-changing ghoul, and it's not one. When he was less than a kilometer away from the clearing in the forest, Bourne suddenly stopped and whispered to little Yucky. At the same time, he also took out the chain sword modified by alchemy from the deformed lizard wallet. His intuition told him that he was about to encounter a problem that could only be solved by using hands and feet, and the sword in his left hand because of Ostat Magus and the wand, which has a greatly changed appearance, constitutes the main weapon and secondary weapon. Fly to the sky, don't come down yet. Bourne gestured to the little Thestral, who had been flying below the canopy to guide him. The Thestral can fly for a long time, even a foal just a few months old. I can fly in the sky for hours on end without any difficulty at all. After saying that, Bourne, who was now as good as Hagrid, quickly disappeared into the shadows of the dense trees in the Forbidden Forest with agile movements that were inconsistent with his body shape, almost without making any unnecessary noise. Almost every Astartes warrior has had the experience of serving in a reconnaissance company with light armor. He walked this forest path once during the day and walked it a second time. Now he felt as familiar as returning to his own home. The Hogwarts banquet hall was busy. Projection workers wearing loose overalls and peaked caps were nervously adjusting the magic projector and constantly moving the positions of the 4 long tables, seemingly trying to find a better viewing angle for the little wizards sitting here. They look very professional. These people are lean, and their facial features are covered by peaked caps. One of them is obviously black, and even the other 2 white-skinned ones have darker hair and skin, with typical French characteristics. Dolores Umbridge was no longer here. After fixing the curtains required for the screening, the Pink Lady twisted her waist and walked out of the banquet hall and walked to the principal's office on the 8th floor of the castle. Wherever the spotlight is, her battlefield is, and she will never be held back by a trivial matter. Kumbauer. A fair-skinned projection worker, after moving the magic projector for an unknown number of times, saw that no one was paying attention around him, so he walked behind the dark-skinned foreman and asked in a low voice, "What should we do later?" When he heard someone calling his name, the black foreman immediately looked around, and then suddenly grabbed the collar of the man who called his name. The man quickly made a gesture that all French people understand. Kumbauer then loosened his collar, then poked his chest with his finger, lowered his head and warned fiercely, "What level do you have? You dare to call me directly?" Kumbauer stopped abruptly in the middle of his words, his face turned livid, and 2 long canine teeth popped out of his wide-open mouth. "C'est la merde." He felt a burning pain in his arm. He lifted up his sleeve and saw that the pattern that he had deliberately covered with other tattoos 10 years ago actually resurfaced. The poisonous snake is crawling, and the skull seems to be swallowing a strange tongue. Voldemort. A name that still frightened him. Suddenly, like a thunderbolt from the clear sky, flashed across Kambaur's mind. Not only that, as the black demon mark continued to move, Kambaur seemed to hear some faint sounds. They stirred his mind, gradually reviving the vampire nature he had deliberately suppressed. Blood, blood, blood. He wanted to kill people and drink blood. Everyone who often kills people should know that when the murderous intention starts to boil over, the urge to commit evil often becomes uncontrollable. Even if some people don't have toilet paper, they may stain the walls and have to clean up afterwards. Let's have some fun first and then talk about it. Kambaur, who has been tested for a long time, is slightly better, but his two men who were also branded with the mark of the Dark Devil more than 10 years ago have completely lost control at this time. The vampire who was responsible for adjusting the position of the long table in the Hogwarts banquet hall was like a husky in heat, growling ho-ho while scratching the long table with his pop-up fingernails, causing sawdust to fly. The vampire who had just been scolded by Kambaur covered his head, spun around in circles, backed up, and knocked the magic projector said to be Fabrique en France directly off the high-leg stool. At this time, a group of Gryffindor students happened to walk into the banquet hall, and the three of them all turned to look at them. Vampire. Although the Defense Against the Dark Arts course's teachers change frequently, the students at Hogwarts are not so bad at basics that they can't even recognize such a famous dark magic creature as a vampire. After being forced to transform, those guys' faces are crawling. They were full of earthworm-shaped blood vessels, their canine teeth protruded, and the whites of their eyes became red and shiny due to congestion. They looked at the little wizard as if they wanted to eat people. If you simply encounter a vampire, some young wizards from wizarding families or senior wizards may not be afraid. Because although they are dark magic creatures, vampires are actually considered a type of humanoid in the Ministry of Magic's judgment system. The basis for this division is that the Ministry of Magic believes that a vampire is a creature with enough intelligence to understand the laws of magical society and bear some of the responsibilities that must be shouldered in the process of formulating and enforcing these laws. House elves and goblins are the two humanoids most closely related to wizards. What they have in common is that they are both managed by the Ministry of Magic. In fact, all human beings in this world will be accepted by default to recognize this rule. Some humanoid creatures, such as centaurs and mermaids, have been trying to find excuses, unwilling to be classified with the hags, to define their race as beasts. In fact, they do not want to be regulated by the Ministry of Magic. Legal restrictions. And yet, wizards still believe that centaurs and mermaids are humanoids, and the Ministry of Magic still asserts the highest authority over them. Similarly, vampires are also a kind of humanoid. In the past 100 or 200 years, they have been relatively well behaved and rarely violated the law. Moreover, compared to werewolves, who are often juxtaposed with them in Muggle legends, vampires are definitely models of law-abiding. Of course, there are no absolutes. After all, it is a kind of black magic creature. If it is not fed for a long time, a vampire driven crazy by hunger will go crazy and attack humans. When they are mad, vampires will show three typical characteristics: veins popping out, canine teeth elongating and bloody eyes. What's even more coincidental is that among the Greenland Fondo students, some of them are learning how to identify and expel vampires in their Defense Against the Dark Arts class this week. Therefore, these senior students took out their wands and chanted 2 spells according to Professor Quirrell's instructions. Stick a big stick in your front teeth. Garlic is flying. Yes, this is indeed what Quirrell taught in class, and there is nothing wrong in theory. Putting a stick in the front teeth can make the front teeth bulge so that vampires cannot bite with canine teeth, and the smell of garlic will also cause vampires to keep beating. Sneeze, causing discomfort and even leaving on their own, but the real problem is that the little wizards are not facing ordinary vampires. Before they turned into monsters, all 3 of Kambaur were wizards, and they all attended Ouagadougou, the best magic school in Africa, although they were later expelled from the school. The knowledge of professors at Ouagadougou Magic Academy has 2 characteristics. First, they will teach students to cast spells without a wand from the beginning of their enrollment. Therefore, the spell casting speed of Ouagadougou students is generally the fastest among their age groups. Not to mention the flying garlic which had to be summoned from the Hogwarts kitchen recently and took some time to take effect. Even the evil curse sticking the stick in the front teeth was quickly countered by Kambaur and the other 3. The curse offset the account. And after being enraged, these 3 vampires, who had been tortured by the dark mark and fell into a state of pseudo-hunger, were attacked by the curse. They could no longer control the bloodthirsty in their hearts and pounced directly on this group of people. Gryffindor's Little Wizard. Chapter 60. The ceiling of the Hogwarts ballroom is enchanted to match the outside environment. At this time, because it was pouring rain outside the castle and the candles were not fully lit, the banquet hall seemed dim. Coupled with the 3 vampires baring their teeth and claws, this scene really has the feeling of castle terror brought into reality. The little witch Hermione, who was blocked by her seniors, secretly swore in her heart, anyone who watches horror movies again will be a dog. A dozen students faced 3 vampires and frequently released various spells in the banquet hall. Naturally, the commotion caused was quite big. First, the little snakes and little badgers who lived in the basement heard the noise and ran out of their respective common rooms. Later, even the little wizards from Ravenclaw appeared one after another. In the end, even Filch, who was dozing off, in preparation for catching the nocturnal little wizard that night, was alarmed by the sound of magic exploding in the banquet hall. He grabbed a mop and ran out of the office. Kambauer noticed this. This vampire also retains more intelligence than his 2 companions. Hurry up and catch some little wizards. With the agility of a vampire, he avoided a curse and turned around to give each of his 2 companions a big butt bag. What he meant was, capture the 2 little wizards as hostages, and whether they want to escape or count, they would have more room for maneuver. But those 2 guys obviously misunderstood what Kambauer meant. They thought the boss was addicted to blood, dust, and wanted to beat the little wizards to their teeth as a sacrifice. Isn't this a coincidence? So do they. Recently, they have been working very hard to disguise themselves as magical movie projection workers. Another important figure in the team, Madeline, the main force in the fairy jump business in Albania, became addicted to blood after coming to the UK, so she has been suffering from loss of control recently. She couldn't even move with the team, but could only hide in the Forbidden Forest near Hogwarts to provide them with limited support. After receiving the boss's order, the 2 graduates from Wagadu Magic School immediately cheered up and used the skills they learned when they were in school. In addition to wandless spell casting, another feature of Wagadu's teaching content is that students are taught self-transformation from the lower grades, and among Wagadu's senior students, at least 1 or 2 students can successfully learn every year. Nemagus. Moreover, perhaps because of the early start of self-transformation practice, Wagadu's animagus wizards can often actively control the animal they will turn into before successfully learning this high-end transformation technique. By evading the curse, the 2 men ducked under a long table in the banquet hall, and when they emerged again, they had all completed their transformation. One turned into a hyena. One turned into a honey badger. The 2 bullies in the African region rushed towards the lion cubs, and they were braver than the real bullies. The vampire who turned into a hyena kept circling around the little wizards, as if he really wanted to launch a moondigger attack. Some of the little wizards were so scared that they trembled and hurriedly held their wands and followed him in circles. The vampire who turned into a honey badger used the interference of his companions to grab the little wizard's robe and crawled onto them. He pointed at their wand or the arm or palm holding the wand, and scratched them frequently. The little Gryffindor wizards who were originally gathered together suddenly became confused by the sneak attack, and began to dodge in a panic. Hermione was horrified. Looking at the honey badger showing its sharp claws towards her, she even felt that the rat Spotted, whom she hated so much not long ago, looked so handsome compared to it. After all, she is just an 11-year-old girl. In times of crisis, she can only instinctively follow the people around her and run away in a panic. However, those 2 beasts transformed from vampires knew how to bully the weak. Persimmons should be picked soft and pinched. Among the fleeing crowd, they almost instantly locked onto Hermione, who seemed to have no ability to resist. Again, she was just an 11-year-old girl after all. The spotted hyena barked wildly, and jumped quickly on its 4 legs. First it jumped onto a bench, and then jumped onto a long table, and pounced on Hermione who was escaping in a triple jump. This is sure. He even laughed triumphantly in his heart, and his big mouth with ferocious fangs opened wide, and disgusting saliva stretched into thin threads at the corners of his mouth. Get down, Granger! A frightened and muffled cry suddenly came from the door of the banquet hall. The one shouting was Ron, who was playing with a quaffle used for team training. The Gryffindor Quidditch team had just finished training. Ron and the others were also playing with his friend Harry and the ball. The rest of the team returned to the castle for dinner. When they walked into the castle gate and saw Hermione about to be bitten by a spotted hyena, Ron shouted as if reflexively. At the same time, he unconsciously twisted his waist, stepped forward, and rounded his arms, like a football kickoff, although he did not know this sport at all, and threw the red quaffle, about 12 inches in diameter. Hearing the reminder, although Hermione couldn't lie down directly, she still knelt down and hugged her little head with messy long hair tightly with both hands. And the quaffle, spinning past Hermione's head, hit the spotted hyena's big mouth and stuffed it into it. After doing all this, Ron subconsciously wanted to run over and pull Hermione up, but as soon as he took a step, he found that his legs were cramping from nervousness. He had asked Hermione to lie down just now, but now he was doing it for the first time. One lay down on the bluestone frosted floor of the castle. I go. Ron's best friend Harry also reacted at this time, quickly stuffed the broomstick on his shoulders under his crotch, and flew out with a swish. Captain Wood, who was standing behind him, subconsciously stretched out his arms to catch him, but failed. Riding a broomstick in the castle was a violation of school rules and would result in demerit points and solitary confinement. However, Wood immediately retracted his arm. Why are there spotted hyenas in the castle? Also, he also noticed at this time that people from his college were running around in the banquet hall. Damn it, it must be Slytherin. Indecisive, Slytherin. He thought that the spotted hyenas and all that were all a trick played by people from Slytherin house. Whenever this happens, Gryffindor people don't care whether points are deducted or not. All the players pick up their uniforms and take out their wands. And Harry, who was riding the best broomstick currently on the market, immediately rushed to Hermione's side, grabbed the little witch's arm, and stuffed the quaffle from her mouth. The spotted hyena was dragged away from his eyes. Just at this moment, the honey badger transformed from a vampire also ran out of the banquet hall. This guy was obviously more insidious and vicious than his companion who transformed into a spotted hyena. Animagus can partially reflect a wizard's character traits. He did not choose to care about his companions, but stretched out his claws and pounced on Ron, who fell to the ground.